Chapter 2231. The 300 dragon scales of the second stage were more complicated and had more engravings. But for Lin Feng, who was proficient in copying the first stage of the 400 dragon scales, it was not difficult to get started, but it took more time. While copying the engravings, he was immersed in the profound meaning of the space law contained in them. Time flew. In just over 500 days, Lin Feng perfectly engraved the 300 dragon scales, meticulously and accurately. However, it was much more difficult to connect these 300 dragon scales with each other than the previous 400 dragon scales. After all, it was the connection of mid-level space origin, and each dragon scale had its own mysteries. Fortunately, he had already analyzed the 300 mid-level space origin, and the comprehension was twice as easy with half the effort. In 2 years, Lin Feng had made remarkable progress. He perfectly drew the 300 dragon scales of the dragon body in one go without any mistake. Next, it's connecting the previous 400 dragon scales with these 300 dragon scales. Lin Feng knew that this was a big project. It was not just connecting the two but also related to some unique secret. It was like 2 different sets of saber moves, with different artistic conception, different speed, and different power. It was easier said than done to combine them. In fact, it's simply fusion. I can even fuse light and darkness into one. It's just connecting the dragon body and dragon scale engravings. What's so difficult about that? Lin Feng was unperturbed. The truth was just as he'd expected. In less than half a year, he'd successfully connected the 2 parts of the dragon's body into one. Since then, the 700 dragon scales had formed a perfect whole, and more than half of the dragon's body had been completed. Sure enough, the comprehension is very different. Lin Feng sighed. The 700 dragon scales of the dragon body contained a lot of mysteries of the space law, and the energy was also different. This was something that the previous 400 dragon scales and 300 dragon scales did not have, and it would only appear when they were combined. However, compared to the golden dragon in the void, it's still a little less. Lin Feng compared them and easily found the difference. One was really full of life aura and the golden light was vivid and lifelike. The other was just a simple space engraving, and it was easy to see through at a glance. I've only connected the 2 parts now. I'll see the real situation when all 4 parts of the dragon body are connected. I just don't know if there's enough time. Lin Feng was a little worried. Although he had already passed through 2 segments of the spatial cloud ladder, they were only the easiest 2 segments. He had yet to reach the most complicated 2 segments. Earlier, he'd returned in failure from the 3rd segment of the spatial cloud staircase. The 3rd segment of the cloud ladder. Where did Lin Feng go? You haven't seen him for 2 years. Have you given up? Yen Fajie was still firmly analyzing the high-level space origin. Although his speed was not fast, he walked step by step with great steadiness. In any case, his goal was no longer to pass through the cycle of reincarnation. On the contrary, he was even more tranquil and undistracted, allowing his analysis speed to advance by leaps and bounds. However, the difficulty of obtaining a high-level space origin was still there. Up until now, Yen Fajie was still only at the beginning of the 3rd segment of the cloud ladder. He couldn't even catch up with Lin Feng's previous progress. Suddenly, Yen Fajie turned around to look when he sensed a wave of fluctuation from the spatial scaling staircase, and he noticed Lin Feng's appearance out of the corner of his eye. He was slightly surprised and curious because Lin Feng's position was completely different from before. His aura seems to have changed a little. His gaze is not on the spatial cloud ladder or the high-level space laws. Strange. Following Lin Feng's gaze, Yen Fajie was even more curious. What's so special about this giant golden dragon? Is it related to Lin Feng's disappearance in the past 2 years? Ugh, it seems to be a little unusual. To be able to reach this point, Yen Fajie was naturally not an ordinary person. comprehension, ability, talent, all aspects were dragons among men. Seeing Lin Feng's changes, Yen Fajie was immediately inspired and immersed himself in the space laws that the giant golden dragon carried. At this time, Lin Feng had already begun the third stage of copying. 200 dragon scales. Lin Feng had tried it before, so he knew how difficult it was. This time, he tried it again. With his previous experience and familiarity, he was much more confident. Starting from scratch, he carefully copied every single dragon scale. Every single stroke was perfect. 1 scale, 2 scales, 3 scales. Although the difficulty had increased a lot, the copying itself had not changed much. It had just changed from a single line to multiple lines, and the composition was more complicated. Comprehending the mysteries of the space laws was the most important. This stage was a stage that he had to cross. Therefore, Lin Feng had made a painful decision at that time. He would rather give up 100 years and start all over again. Facts proved that his decision back then was correct. Now that he had started all over again, he had gone further at an even faster speed. In just 5 years, he had surpassed where he was back then. In the 20th year, he had constructed more than 100 dragon scales. In the 33rd year, he had completed 200 dragon scales and the high-level space origin structure. In the 49th year, the 200 dragon scales were perfectly connected, condensing into a brand new whole in one go, and the space origin structure increased dramatically. In the 61st year, the 200 and 300 dragon scales were combined. In the 75th year, the 900 dragon scales were completed. With one stroke of the composition, the golden dragon's body was perfectly presented, exuding a terrifying aura. It was unparalleled for a time. This path was the right choice. Lin Feng stepped onto the peak of the third step and looked down at Yen Fajie, who was still thinking hard and working hard to climb up. He had started later but reached first, completely surpassing Yen Fajie. The dragon's body has been completed, and the only thing missing is the finishing touch. If the dragon's head can also be completed, the entire golden dragon will be perfectly presented without any flaws. My attainments in the space laws will increase greatly, and my chances of stepping into the 6th path of reincarnation will increase greatly. With bright eyes, Lin Feng stepped onto the next step. It was only a small step, but it was a qualitative improvement, and he had stepped into a new world. Lin Feng arrived at the top of the pyramid, and the first thing he stared at was the roaring dragon's head. It was high up, and a pair of domineering dragon eyes looked down on the entire land. He was the emperor. In this world, he was not the only one. Hong Kong and the Diamond Empress were already one step ahead of him, and they had already landed on the 4th step, which was enough to show their abilities. Among them, the Diamond Empress was at the beginning of the last 100 steps, and the pressure on her was quite great, so it was not easy to improve. As for Hong Kong, this super-monstrous genius that even the meteor planet thought highly of, he was a special life form, and now he was displaying his peerless talent. The 88th step. How impressive! Lin Feng sighed. In less than 200 years, Hong Kong was already close to the peak, about to reach the top of the space ladder and step into the 6th path of reincarnation. This was a true dragon among men, and it was incomparable. Chapter 2232. A human. It's him? The 4th step wasn't big. Lin Feng's arrival immediately attracted the attention of Hong Kong and the Crystal Empress. Hong Kong looked at Lin Feng curiously. He wanted to know how this human with such a low life level managed to get here. In the Diamond Empress's eyes, there was a hint of wariness and caution. However, anyone who could reach this point was definitely not a mediocre person. One path of the 6 paths of reincarnation was better than the other. Even she herself was only lingering on the 4th step. This human's strength seemed ordinary, but he must be capable. Shua. Lin Feng ignored the gazes of Hong Kong and the Crystal Empress. The moment he got used to it, He began to draw the dragon head of the golden dragon. The 100 scales here were more closely connected, and there were many overlapping parts. It was difficult to draw them individually, and even more difficult to connect them into a line. 100 scales corresponded to 100 steps, which corresponded to 100 top-notch space source points. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Pointing in the air, Lin Feng forced himself to remain calm. He clearly knew that this was a critical moment, and he had to choose the last step of this path. If he didn't succeed, he would die trying. Sweat dripped from his forehead. The first and last scales were often the most difficult to draw. The former was lacking experience, while the latter was the most stressful, especially when it came to top-notch space source points, which were comparable to space laws. Drawing them was easier said than done. Fortunately, Lin Feng was only copying it. He only needed to grasp its form and spirit, and did not need to understand its meaning. If that was the case, it would be utterly impossible for him to reach this place in a short period of time and catch up to Hong Kong and the Chrysalis Empress. A total of 17 years. I finally succeeded. Lin Feng wiped away the sweat on his forehead and sighed with emotion. The giant dragon scale in front of him was drawn with a single stroke. Every detail was perfect and flawless. The space engravings crisscrossed like the curves of a flower. It was beautiful beyond compare. Rather than calling it a dragon scale, it was better to call it a work of art. It was hard to look away. Being able to successfully draw the first dragon scale meant that the difficulty of drawing a single dragon scale was within his grasp. Lin Feng quickly began to draw the second dragon scale. He was even more confident. 15 years. It was faster, more accurate, and more perfect than the first dragon scale. It can be even faster. Lin Feng's eyes shone with vigor as he drew the third and fourth dragon scales one after another. The seemingly complicated dragon head turned into 100 scales, making it much simpler. From 17 years to 12 years, then from 12 years to 10 years, 9 years, and even 8 years, Lin Feng's progress was remarkable. It only took him 3 years and 7 months to get to the 99th dragon scale. As for the 100th dragon scale, that's it. Under the strong pressure, Lin Feng was forced into his strongest state. It took him only 2 years and 11 months to complete a perfect dragon scale drawing. It was done in one go, like a soaring dragon roaring. That was where the dragon's eye was, the finishing touch. Although it lacked a bit of spirit, Lin Feng's heart was filled with satisfaction after perfectly drawing 100 dragon scales. At this moment, it was as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart, and he completely relaxed. Finally, it was done. Lin Feng looked up. After more than 400 years of continuous drawing, the situation on the fourth step had changed. The Diamond Empress had climbed to the 63rd step and was gritting her teeth as she charged up. But at the end, more than half of the 1,000-year time limit had passed, and she was still at the 63rd step. Her hope was extremely slim. As for Bastard, the last square? Lin Feng's heart trembled. He had guessed that Bastard's talent was invincible, and that he was the proud son of heaven of the god-fallen world, recognized by the wandering planets, but he did not expect him to be so powerful. Seeing was believing. Bastard was now standing on the last step. He only needed one more step to reach the top and officially enter the sixth path of reincarnation. There was still more than enough time. Amazing indeed. Lin Feng sighed. Looking at the tall figure with a natural domineering aura, he felt admiration. Although he had completed the last 100 dragon scales, he was still far from completion. There were still 2 rather complicated steps to go. First, he had to connect the 100 dragon scales of the dragon head. The connection of these 100 dragon scales was very complicated, like a precise circuit diagram. The slightest carelessness would mess it up. Moreover, it was a top-level space source, and it contained even more profound spatial laws. Second, he had to connect the dragon head and dragon body. The concepts and energy of the two were very different. To fuse them together, it would take a Herculean effort. Even Lin Feng himself wasn't sure if he could complete these 2 steps within the time limit. However, it all depended on effort. I'll take it as far as I can. Lin Feng did not care about Bastard's progress. This hurdle was mainly a competition with him. Whether others could advance or not had nothing to do with him. Instead, Bastard's arrival at the last step stimulated him deeply. He wanted to compete with the Bastard. He also wanted to advance to the 6th path of reincarnation and reach the end. I will never admit defeat. Lin Feng gritted his teeth and made up his mind. His lower finger was even more powerful and firm. He began to copy the 100 dragon scales from scratch. His mind was completely immersed in every composition. At the same time, he comprehended the spatial laws contained within. He was going all out. The 5th stage of the Black Vortex stimulated Lin Feng's strongest spatial talent. In terms of talent, he was not inferior to Bastard and the Crystal Queen. It was just that his foundation was still shallow and unstable. He had never immersed himself in the path of space. However, this did not hinder his progress, especially at the crucial moment. The spatial laws contained in the dragon head were the essence and essence. It was much more precise and perfect than the dragon body. Although it only took up a small 100 scales, each dragon scale contained a top-level space source. A single dragon scale was not cheap. The spatial laws were profound. Both aspects improved at the same time. They complemented each other. The comprehension of the law of space, even if it was only a little, led to the copying of the dragon scale. Every stroke of the drawing of the dragon scale was a whole new comprehension process. It was different every time, and there was a new understanding every time. Slowly, the river of time flowed. Lin Feng's comprehension became deeper and deeper. His footsteps also started from the 1st step of the 4th stage. As he comprehended, he climbed step by step. At first, the Crystal Queen did not pay much attention. However, when Lin Feng reached the step she was on, the Crystal Queen widened her eyes in shock. He caught up. How is this possible? The Diamond Queen was flabbergasted as she stared in disbelief at this inconspicuous human. Now, he had actually set foot on the 64th grid just like her. One had to know that every step forward was extremely difficult for her, but this human was very easy. It was as if he was really climbing the step. The 65th step. Lin Feng surpassed the Crystal Queen. The latter opened her mouth slightly, completely stunned. Chapter 2233. He did not stop. Under the flabbergasted gaze of the Diamond Queen, Lin Feng took one step at a time as if he was climbing up without the slightest hindrance. His calm and composed demeanor made the Diamond Queen wonder if she was dreaming. It was so difficult for her to climb even one step. She had been improving step by step for hundreds of years, and now she was almost at her limit. However, this unremarkable human had easily surpassed her. It was as if there was no bottleneck at all as he continued to climb upwards. At the top of the mountain, Hun Yu stood proudly like an emperor. Lin Feng naturally did not know. At this moment, he was completely immersed in the comprehension of the spatial laws. Sometimes he would step forward, sometimes he would stop, and sometimes he would be enlightened. His finger pointed in the air, and dragon scales appeared one after another. From half a dragon head to half a dragon head, and then to half a dragon head. His progress was rapid. In this state, his comprehension improved rapidly. Very soon, he had already left the Crystal Queen far behind, leaving her in the dust. Even though the Crystal Queen was a peak divine being, the increase in her strength here did not provide her with any substantial fundamental help. Her ability to comprehend space was the key. In the end, her talent was still lacking. She could not compare to Hun Yu, and she could not compare to Lin Feng. Hun Yu, who was at a critical moment in his comprehension, was only one step away from reaching the top. Suddenly, he sensed movement behind him, and a faint pressure came from his heart. When he turned around, he was shocked. Human brat. A human has caught up with me? To Hun Yu, this was undoubtedly like a bolt of lightning. He was shocked, and his proud heart felt humiliated. His eyes shone brightly. Ah! He roared, as if declaring his sovereignty. Hun Yu waved his hand, domineeringly. His entire body instantly burned, and his bloodline was fully activated. Boundless power surged. His body was like a huge black hole, absorbing the spatial elements and gathering them all in an instant. But. Hun Yu clenched his fists, and his aura and power suddenly changed. He took a step forward and forcibly broke through the final bottleneck. His figure disappeared before everyone's eyes like a golden dragon. His aura pierced the sky, and he was invincible and unstoppable. Bastard, he passed. The Crystal Queen muttered. She had guessed that such a day would come, but she did not expect it to come so quickly and so suddenly. Hunchback broke through the shackles right under her eyes and successfully reached the top, entering the sixth path of reincarnation. There was no obstruction, no pressure. This was the strength of the strongest person in the God-fallen world. Even though they were both pinnacle gods, the disparity in their strength was apparent. She was still far from being able to match up to Hun Kong. Impressive. Lin Feng also woke up from his drawing state. With such a huge fluctuation, it was hard not to wake up. He stepped on the 90th square, and was still 10 steps away from Huanyu, but he was unable to take another step forward. Lin Feng clearly knew that this was his current limit. The dragon head formed a perfect whole. Even the final finishing touch was perfectly presented in a state of epiphany, without any flaws. However, the second step had yet to begin, and his comprehension of the laws of space was still in a state of confusion. There were still 10 squares left, and they were still as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The further he went, the harder it was to determine the steps, especially the last square. Even someone as strong as Hun Kong had been trapped here for hundreds of years. Today, he broke through under Lin Feng's stimulation. Since Huanyu can do it, I can do it too. Lin Feng was even more confident. Since Hun Kong could take this step and enter the sixth path of reincarnation, he could definitely do it too. There was still a little less than half of the 1,000-year time limit left. He only lacked one small step, connecting the dragon head and dragon body. Quick, quick, quick. Lin Feng gritted his teeth and made the final push. Compared to himself, the Crystal Queen and Yen Fa had long lost their chance of success, but he still had a chance. His 1,000 years of hard work depended on whether he could succeed this time. The key to connecting the dragon head and dragon body was fusion. It's very difficult to connect with the laws of space. I'll use other methods. Lin Feng knew after trying. With his half-baked knowledge of the laws of space, it was very difficult to perfectly fuse the two into one. However, he had perfectly copied every dragon scale. This was the key. Therefore, he could try to fuse them by copying a specific rhythm. The key to fusing is whether the copy can be completed in one stroke. If it can be completed, the dragon head and dragon body can form a perfect whole. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. The image of the golden dragon in his mind was very clear. There was less and less time. From 800 years to 900 years to 950 years. Now there were less than 10 years left. Every copy was a wholehearted comprehension for Lin Feng. Combined with the laws of space in the dragon head and dragon body, although the laws of space in the dragon body were crude, they made up for it perfectly. Piecing them together, they formed a complete picture. Go, Lin Feng! Yen Fa cheered for Lin Feng on the fourth step. He no longer had a chance, but he hoped that Lin Feng could succeed and fight for the honor of the Origin Awakening Continent's elite. Although they came from humble origins and were insignificant, they still had the ability to compete with the strongest in the God-fallen world. He can't really succeed, right? The Crystal Empress stared at Lin Feng. Her eyes were filled with jealousy, envy, and disbelief. A human that she had looked down on previously was now standing on the 99th step. Only Hun had stood on this step. Now there was another one. However, whether he could reach the top was still unknown. The Crystal Empress had mixed feelings. She hoped that Lin Feng could succeed, but she also did not want him to succeed. However, the decision was not in her hands. The last 3 years. Whoosh, whoosh. Lin Feng's fingers flew. Now, he was even more skilled and relaxed. A picture scroll was drawn with a snap of his fingers. However, compared to the golden dragon in the void, there was still something missing. However, he could not say what it was. Even the finishing touch was missing a bit of essence. It's the aura of life. How do I get it? Do I have to comprehend the laws of space? I'm still missing something. At the end of the 1,000-year time limit, Lin Feng was even more anxious. He forced out his greatest potential. Lin Feng stared at the golden dragon in the sky. It had clearly been drawn perfectly, but there was still a little bit missing. It was this little bit that prevented him from reaching the peak. Lin Feng's eyes turned red and he pursed his lips. Suddenly, his eyes fell on the golden skin of the golden dragon. Outside the dragon's scales, Lin Feng suddenly understood. So that's how it is. In the overall composition, the outermost layer is connected, but the laws of space are missing. It lacks a frame. The laws of space frame the golden dragon. Lin Feng laughed involuntarily. He hooked his finger and completed the last stroke. In an instant, the obstacles in front of him disappeared. There was no bottleneck. Lin Feng easily stepped through the mist and reached the top. Chapter 2234. Everyone looked up to the reincarnation of destiny. Since the appearance of the wandering planet, endless years and endless reincarnations of destiny were all for the sake of selecting one of the favored ones to fulfill the destiny of the wandering planet and become the only emperor. But until now, this position was still empty. Even breaking through to the 6th reincarnation was harder than ascending to heaven. After more than 80,000 reincarnations, the powerhouses all stopped at the first 5 reincarnations. Among them, there was no lack of peak god powerhouses who could not get the favor of the reincarnation of destiny. This time, however, was an exception. First, a super-existence recognized by the wandering planet appeared. Even the rules gave way to it. The first 5 reincarnations could be said to be extremely powerful, and no one could be compared to it. Then, there was the human Lin Feng, step by step, growing up from the weakest. Now, his combat power was comparable to a peak god, and he could even compete with Hunyu. 2 powerhouses advanced to the 6th reincarnation. In more than 80,000 reincarnations of destiny, such a scene could be counted on one hand. There were only 3 times, and these 3 times were also the closest to the completion of the 6th reincarnation. It was very difficult, because this was the most extreme test. The reincarnation of destiny set by the wandering planet was originally set by the rules of the origin. Heaven wanted to select the favored one to inherit and control the wandering planet and become the master of the universe. Lin Feng looked at Hunyu, and Hunyu also looked at him. He had never looked at this human directly. It was not until the 5th reincarnation that he noticed the existence of this insignificant human. He thought that he would not have any interaction with him, but he did not expect this insignificant human to reach the end. The 6th reincarnation. It was enough to prove the strength of this insignificant human. This was not a promotion that could be achieved by luck alone. Even those as strong as the Crystal Queen and Tiku were defeated, but this insignificant human could stand out. Hunyu could not help but look at him a few more times and keep an eye on him. Hunyu. It was Lin Feng's first time looking at Hunyu, this invincible special life form, up close. Although he was now comparable to a peak god, he was still lacking a lot compared to Hunyu. There seemed to be an invisible gap between the two that was difficult to cross. Hunyu was really strong. Even if they were not close to each other, he could feel the oppressive and powerful aura that was suffocating. If the sixth path of reincarnation were to compete with him, he had no chance of winning, at least not now. His strength had already surpassed the level of strength that she knew, and he has surpassed the pinnacle of the deity stage, Lin Feng murmured to himself. It was no wonder that even the wandering planets had opened the back door for him and specially made concessions for him. Bastard strength was genuine. What exactly was the sixth path of reincarnation? Lin Feng was very curious, but he still needed to wait because the 1,000-year time limit was not up yet. There were still 2 powerful cultivators in the 5th reincarnation. Although they basically had no hope of advancing, the rules would not change because of this. He waited patiently. As Lin Feng recovered his energy, he pondered hard, consolidating what he had just comprehended. The drawing of the golden dragon had left an indelible impression in his heart. To be honest, he had already mastered the rather difficult law of space, and his cultivation was not shallow. Being able to copy it proved that he had actually solved the riddle. However, it was just like solving a math problem. It was directly calculated by putting the formula in, and not understanding the content and structure. Therefore, it was difficult to truly understand it. It was just a smattering. Give me some time, and I will definitely master it. If he was completely proficient in the law of space, it would be possible to construct the entire law of space from another perspective. However, the problem was that he was not proficient in both, and it would be a little awkward. Although he had comprehended a lot in the process of drawing, it was not everything. It was only a part of it. Let's try again. In Lin Feng's mind, every stroke of the golden dragon's drawing was clearly remembered. Even if he copied it again, he could copy it flawlessly. Therefore, he was still confident. It was like holding a peerless secret book in his hand, and he could comprehend it at any time. If he could comprehend this law of space, with its power coupled with his stage 5 black vortex, its power would be unpredictable. It would definitely become his trump card. However, he did not have that much time. The 1,000-year time limit was short. Moreover, comprehending the law of space was a very long process. Let alone 1,000 years, even 10,000 years, or even 100,000 years, was just a blink of an eye. Lin Feng had only just calmed down and comprehended for a short while when a strange phenomenon appeared in his mind. It was as if an iron gate had fallen, sealing the gap between the 5th and 6th cycles of reincarnation of destiny. There was no longer any connection. Meanwhile, the Diamond Empress and Yen Fagia were eliminated from this cycle of reincarnation of destiny. Although they were very strong and extraordinarily talented, the results were very cruel and very realistic. There were more than 80,000 cycles of reincarnation of destiny. There were also those who were stronger than them, and there were also those who had better potential and natural talent. However, the cycle of reincarnation of destiny only focused on the result. Now there were only 2 great elites who had reached the end. Bastard Lin Feng. Boom. There was a huge tremor in his mind. This was a power that was like the might of heaven descending, and it was unstoppable. It was as if a single thought from this terrifying power could destroy one's body and soul. Even if Lin Feng had the 10,000 origin mustard stone, it was no exception. Leave or stay? Lin Feng's mind was greatly shaken. However, he had not expected that the final cycle of reincarnation would be like this. It had just begun, and it had already put him in his place. Or it could be said that this was the last mercy of the heavens, and it had given him and Bastard a choice. This cycle of reincarnation was very difficult. If he accepted it, it would mean that he had signed a life and death contract, and he would not rest until he was dead. If he still hesitated now, he could still take a step back, and he would still be able to fly freely. We've already come this far. Everything is naturally destined by the heavens. Lin Feng smiled calmly, and there was no fear in his heart. Since he had chosen this path, No matter what the result was, he would continue walking it. Bastard was the same. His eyes were still calm, and he did not waver in the slightest. He had come here to break the fate of the world. Whoosh! A huge circle of light suddenly appeared in front of Lin Feng. It was as if a heavenly gate had opened. Golden light flashed, and there was a rich spatial element. He could not help but be drawn into it. His senses gradually blurred. His body was wrapped in rich spatial element, and a black vortex spun rapidly. What is this place? Lin Feng felt that he had come to a vast white area. There was an invisible barrier around him that isolated him. There was a thin mist in front of him that seemed to be hiding something. Bastard had long since disappeared. His consciousness was very clear, but his body was very hazy. Dreamland! As soon as Lin Feng thought about it, he suddenly understood in his heart. The flow of time here was completely different from the outside world. It was as if he was in a dreamland. Dreaming for 100 years, his thoughts were very fast, but his body seemed to be stuck in the same place, unable to move. A world of consciousness, comprehension of spatial law? Lin Feng said softly. Chapter 2235. The wandering planet itself was a carrier of space elements. Here, the time laws and space laws, which were both heavenly laws, were completely different. He could barely feel the existence of time elements, and only the most basic time laws were maintained. Therefore, almost all the special life forms and experts born here cultivated space laws. So, the 6 paths of reincarnation have very high requirements for space talent. Lin Feng could understand, especially the 2nd and 5th reincarnation of destiny, which described the requirements of spatial talent in the most concise and direct way. Fortunately, my space talent is not bad now. If he had just participated in the 5 paths of reincarnation, he would have definitely given up. But now, in terms of space talent, he was confident that he was not inferior to Hun Ho. Being able to defeat the Crystal Queen and enter the 6 paths of reincarnation was enough to prove it. Although his foundation was lacking, his comprehension was not bad. The 6 paths of reincarnation, the world of consciousness, seemed to be set up for comprehension. Swish, swish, space pressure came from all directions. His surroundings were a vast expanse of whiteness. There was no other pressure, nor was there any energy. There was only his consciousness, and he could sense the spatial elements more clearly. Wisps of space laws came from all directions and were clearly imprinted in his mind. 100,000 origins? Lin Feng received the information clearly. Each wisp of 100,000 origins was deeply imprinted in his mind and could not dissipate for a long time. Comprehension, more comprehension. It was as if someone was forcing him to eat a cake, shoving pieces of cake into his mouth. The feeling was both blissful and uncomfortable. From the most basic of 100,000 origins, to the middle of 100,000 origins, and then to the advanced and top of 100,000 origins. In an instant, Lin Feng felt as if he had swallowed everything in one go. Although he could not comprehend everything, he already had a lot of memories, especially the 1,000 origins he had encountered during the 5 paths of reincarnation. They were scattered all over the place. In his mind, there seemed to be a sea of space with 100,000 origins lit up. Lin Feng had just rested for a while when another wave of 100,000 essences worth of spatial memories poured in from all directions. Lin Feng smiled bitterly. He guarded his mind and emptied his mind, separating himself from the spatial memories that had been forcefully stuffed in. This was not difficult. It was like closing your mouth, and naturally you could not eat anything. He had already discovered this at the end of the first round. However, there seemed to be a reason why it had forcefully given him 100,000 origin points to eat. However, if he continued to eat like this, he might not have enough time to attempt the 6th path of reincarnation. In his mind, there was an invisible hourglass that was dripping sand. Time was of the essence. Hua, His right hand gently parted the clouds, revealing a huge totem of a palace in front of him. Above it was a huge golden dragon, roaring as it soared into the sky. A pair of bright dragon eyes looked down at everyone below, looking like an emperor descending. This golden dragon was so lifelike that it was no different from a real dragon. But Lin Feng reached out to touch it, but there seemed to be an invisible barrier that separated them. It was as if the distance between heaven and earth was insurmountable. His body was also fixed in that instant, but his consciousness was still incomparably active, clearly sensing the jumping of the surrounding space elements. It seems to be related to this golden dragon? Lin Feng stared at the golden dragon. It looked extremely similar. Wasn't this the golden dragon that hovered in the void of the fifth path of reincarnation? It was just that this golden dragon was bigger and more powerful. However, the same body shape, life characteristics, and aura, as well as the 1,000 dragon scales. He had copied it tens of thousands of times, and was naturally clear about it. Cha. Shua. Ha. Lin Feng raised his finger in the air. It was as if he had returned to the fifth path of reincarnation. It was extremely familiar. Yes, this is it. Lin Feng stared straight at the golden dragon. He vaguely understood the meaning of this path of reincarnation. He instantly sat down cross-legged and immersed himself in it. He had chosen the right path. The golden dragon of the fifth path of reincarnation was a foreshadowing. Now it had all appeared. If he took a shortcut in the fifth path of reincarnation, without fully comprehending the 1,000 origin points and the spatial laws contained in the golden dragon, there was basically no chance of passing this hurdle. The only possibility was to receive all the origin points and fully comprehend all the realms. This was undoubtedly more difficult than the previous two. I, asshole, can definitely do it. In another identical consciousness space, asshole was different from Lin Feng. He was not staring at the golden dragon. Instead, he was receiving all the origin points and comprehending all of them. He was very daring. Asshole had taken the third path. However, he had no choice. He had a strong foundation in the fifth path of reincarnation. He had only used half of the 1,000-year time limit to force his way through. He had not fully comprehended the origin point. The shortcut he had taken before was all returned here. So what if I have 100,000 origin points? Asshole went all out. Asshole's bloodline talent was fully activated. At this moment, he had used all his abilities to comprehend the origin point. Here, comprehension was half the work. Asshole's talent was amazing. He had already comprehended more than 10,000 of the origin point. The remaining 80,000 were also involved. Therefore, he could easily break through in the fifth path of reincarnation. Although this path of reincarnation was bumpy, Asshole believed that he could still break through if he walked a few more paths. On the other hand, although Lin Feng's foundation was not as good as Asshole's, he had walked the right path and saved a lot of effort. He had already comprehended a lot of the spatial laws in the Golden Dragon and had just entered the door. He was like a fish in water. Isn't this not just spatial laws? There seems to be other powers hidden. How can pure laws have life aura? What a powerful force! How are these laws formed? How strange. Can the law of light and the law of darkness form the same ability? If this is cultivated, the power of the laws will be terrifying. No wonder they are heaven-rank laws. The more he comprehended, the more shocked Lin Feng was. He sighed at his low cultivation. The true power of laws was vast and boundless, containing unimaginable power. Life aura, spatial laws, they formed a completely different realm. The dream of 100 years, and the comprehension of each thought of 100 years, enlightened Lin Feng. The immersion of his consciousness grew stronger and stronger. Lin Feng's perception was astonishing, and the fifth stage bloodline talent of the Black Vortex was extraordinary. Soon, he had a new understanding of the spatial laws of the Golden Dragon, and his understanding grew stronger and stronger. For the first time, Lin Feng's progress was faster than assholes. Moreover, it was much more advanced. Chapter 2236. In the end, the samsara of destiny was a competition of oneself. It had nothing to do with anyone else. There was only one person who could truly control a wandering planet and become its master. The 6 paths of samsara. Every step seems to be an elimination, but it's actually a selection. It's a selection of an expert who's truly suited for a wandering planet. Lin Feng vaguely understood the purpose of the 6 paths of samsara, from the first path of samsara to the 6th path of samsara. It was the same for the golden dragon. Not only was it closely related to the 5th path of samsara, but it was also closely related to the final fusion. Hun Qing passed the 5th path of samsara by relying on the foundation of the laws of space, not 100,000 origin points or the comprehension of the golden dragon. Moreover, he hasn't reached the origin realm of 100,000 origin points, so he needs to start over here. He'll definitely fall behind me. This is a great opportunity for me. I'll surpass him in one go. Secretly, Lin Feng still treated Hun Qing as his greatest opponent. After all, apart from himself, Hun Qing was the only one left in the 6th path of reincarnation. Moreover, the wandering planets treated him differently and took special care of him. In addition, he was a life born in the God-fallen world, so the difficulty of the 6 paths of reincarnation would be lower. Hun Qing would always be a great threat to him. However, it would not be easy to eliminate him. Not only did he have to pass the 6th path of samsara, but he also had to surpass Hun Qing. Quick! I have to be one step ahead of him and comprehend the golden dragon. Lin Feng constantly copied the 5th path of samsara in his mind. His previous efforts paid off. He copied the image of the golden dragon over and over again, and the laws of space it contained were clearly imprinted in his mind over and over again. He comprehended something every time. It was like practicing the saber. Even if the saber technique was the same every time, as his cultivation increased and his comprehension of the saber increased, his comprehension of the saber would be different every time. He gradually entered a good state. Life force. I seem to understand a little. So the 100,000 origin points can not only form the laws of space, but also the true meaning of space, spatial life, spatial restrictions, and so on. All of them are the same in essence. The unique structure of life force is Lin Feng studied it deeply. Any element that could faintly show life when 100,000 source points were arranged was not simple. This was already prying into the most fundamental mysteries of the universe. Even the space ascension laws were incomparably profound. If he wanted to comprehend it all by himself, it would be useless no matter how strong his comprehension was or how high his cultivation was. But right now it was as if he had the guidance of the heavens. Step by step, he could sense the life force. Then, he connected with the Tao of space and corresponded with it one by one. His comprehension instantly became much clearer. This isn't the spatial laws. The more Lin Feng comprehended, the clearer he became. It was different from the law of space that he had imagined. This was a unique spatial structure. It's not a space life form either. Instead, it's an imprint formed by spatial elements. What was his intention? Lin Feng didn't know either. He only knew that he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off. There was no other way except for comprehension. In this dream world where only one's consciousness was present, time flowed endlessly. If it was outside, it would be at least 1,000 or 10,000 years. The comprehension of this spatial law had already far exceeded Lin Feng's current realm. That included Hunchback. Even if he could comprehend all 100,000 origins, the difficulty of this spatial law far exceeded that. So that's how it is. I understand now. It was a competition between spatial talent and comprehension. Coupled with the fact that he had taken the right path, Lin Feng completely forgot about Hunchback. At this moment, Hunchback was still trying his best to comprehend all 100,000 origins. However, Lin Feng was extremely close to comprehending this spatial law. Bit by bit, it was as if he was touching the truth. Whoosh, his consciousness instantly became clear. The scene in his mind and the scene in his consciousness perfectly overlapped. The golden dragon in front of him seemed to have come alive. It soared between heaven and earth, and the dragon's roar shook the heavens and covered the surroundings. What a strong pressure! Is this really what I comprehended? Lin Feng was completely shocked. With his strength, how could he comprehend such a terrifying power of the spatial law? It was almost able to devour and annihilate him. Such a terrifying existence was not something he could control at present. Suddenly, sizzle, his soul trembled and released a huge force. The golden dragon in the void seemed to tremble. Its huge body trembled, and the golden dragon's scales all over its body emitted bell-like sounds. It twisted unnaturally, and its face became serious and ferocious. Shwa! Shwa! A pair of dragon eyes stared straight at Lin Feng, trying to suppress Lin Feng. Humph! Lin Feng snorted. Even if his soul power was not strong, he could not be suppressed. Although his strength was lacking, his powerful soul power was not weaker than the golden dragon's. Especially the 10,000 origin mustard stone outside his soul, which had a stronger pressure than the golden dragon's. Instantly, the golden dragon roared at the sky, as if it was afraid and wanted to escape. However, there seemed to be an invisible line connecting them. The golden dragon roared and rushed towards Lin Feng, opening its bloody mouth as if to devour everything. Virtual image. Lin Feng's expression did not change. He stood still like a pine tree. Now only ideology was left. He was fearless because his strongest point was soul. He had absolute confidence in himself. Cha! A force seemed to seep into his soul. The black vortex spun rapidly, and a different kind of energy turned into an incomparably pure mark that was deeply imprinted in the depths of his soul. It was a golden dragon, exactly the same as the one he had copied before. However, this golden colossal dragon was alive, had an aura, and even it had its own unique consciousness. So strong. Lin Feng deeply felt this power. The black vortex and his soul were closely connected. At this moment, his heart was completely immersed in it, fusing with it. He knew very well that this was the key to the sixth reincarnation. There were even more secrets hidden within the golden dragon mark. Roar! The powerful force still wanted to break free, but Lin Feng's consciousness was even stronger. The 10,000 origin mustard stone outside his soul was like an iron wall, completely suppressing it. The energy slowly dissipated. The golden dragon seemed to have fused with his soul. Lin Feng felt the sensing ability of the world change in an instant, including the black vortex. His entire body seemed to be evolving as he fused with the golden dragon. He was evolving to a deeper level of life form. Is this the true meaning of the golden dragon's existence? Lin Feng was astonished. Chapter 2237. Never. I will never admit defeat. On the other side, Hunyu tried his best to comprehend the 100,000 space source points over and over again. Here, the comprehension of the 100,000 source points was the clearest. He didn't need to do anything at all. He just needed to meditate and receive it, and he could thoroughly comprehend it. A dream of 100 years, a thought of 1,000 years. 10,000 years of comprehension was only in an instant. Time was meaningless to a wandering planet. It could completely rely on its tyrannical space law to defy the heavens and change the time law to a weak state. Tick, drip. In Han Yu's mind, there was also a huge hourglass, constantly leaking sand. He was fearless. Even if the current situation was not optimistic, Han Yu still believed that he was the chosen one by the heavens to unify the entire wandering planet. No one could stop him. Even if that human stepped into the sixth reincarnation like him, It was nothing more than that. No one could change the final result. He, Hun Yu, would definitely become an emperor. Suddenly, purring, pung. His heartbeat accelerated, and the sound of sand falling still rang in his ears. The comprehension of the space law was still vivid in his mind, but Hun Yu's huge and strong body was trembling slightly. Impossible! Muttering to himself, Hun Yu's eyes were filled with disbelief. How could that human pass? How could he be faster than me? Impossible! For the first time, Hun Yu tasted the bitterness of failure. Just now, the supreme law of the wandering planet told him that a powerhouse had passed the first threshold of the sixth reincarnation. Although this did not affect Hun Yu's progress, it caused a great psychological pressure and blow to his heart. He had never lost before. From birth until now, he had never tasted failure. No matter who it was, they had all been defeated by him. After reaching adulthood, he was invincible in the God-fallen world. His only opponent was himself. But today, Hun Yu finally tasted bitterness. Not a top god, nor a special life form, but a lowly human that he used to look down on, an ant-like existence, now stood above him and above his head. I, Hun Yu, will never allow this. He gritted his teeth, his eyes full of anger. Hun Yu, who had tasted bitterness for the first time, did not give up. Instead, it stimulated his self-esteem, and he felt ashamed and courageous. At this moment, Hun Yu's state reached its peak. The mark of the golden dragon. Just as Lin Feng had expected, this wasn't the space laws. It far surpassed the level of his strength, so it was impossible for him to comprehend it. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it. But imprints were different. What does that mean? Embedded in my soul and acknowledging me as a member of the wandering planet. Lin Feng's feelings toward the wandering planets were very different now. Although he had been on a wandering planet before, he was like an outsider, unable to integrate at all. Right now, not only was his body on it, but his heart was also connected with it. He was incomparably close to the wandering planet, like a family member. In fact, with just a thought, he could appear anywhere on the wandering planet. Leaving the samsara of destiny, leaving the God-fallen world, and returning to the origin-awakened continent only required a single thought. It did not require any effort at all. Amazing! Lin Feng felt that the golden dragon mark was far more magical than this. His heart was in harmony with the wandering planet, which meant that there was a unique and stable connection between him and the wandering planet. In the future, whether he used the laws of space or cultivated the laws of space, he would have an endless supply of space elemental origins. Including right now, he seemed to be in the center of the wandering planet, in a unique space chamber, clearly perceiving everything. It seems that this is the first step. If I can't even integrate with the golden dragon mark, I don't deserve to be the master of the wandering planet. Only by imprinting the mark on my soul and obtaining the recognition of the supreme laws of the wandering planet can I be qualified to inherit and control the wandering planet. There's still a lot of time. The hourglass in Lin Feng's mind had only gone by half. At the beginning of the sixth path of reincarnation, he was far ahead of Hun Chi according to the rules of the samsara of destiny. The next test would only be carried out after the time limit was over. Although he had a lot of time now, he could not gain too much advantage. It's a bit of a waste to cultivate 100,000 origins. My life level is far from the heavenly god stage. Improving my battle strength is the most important thing. With my current battle strength, if I'm asked to fight Hun Chi to the death in the end, there's almost no chance of winning. Although the possibility of Hun Chi passing this test is not high, but, just in case, I should improve my battle strength. Lin Feng was very clear. It would not be easy for Hun Chi to pass this test. First of all, he had not fully comprehended the golden dragon mark before. In other words, he had to comprehend 100,000 origins of space before comprehending the golden dragon space law. Secondly, even if he comprehended the Golden Dragon space law, he had to have strong enough willpower and soul to imprint the mark on the wandering planet. In this regard, he had the advantage because he had the 10,000 origin mustard stone and strong willpower. Although Hun Chi's battle strength was strong, his soul was not as good as his. My bloodline is the same. The fifth stage of the Black Vortex, the space law, is not inferior to Hun Chi's. Now that I have the Golden Dragon mark, which is compatible with the wandering planet, I have left Hun Chi behind in this regard. In the consciousness space of 100 years, I can comprehend the space law with half the effort and cultivate the path of space more freely. Lin Feng was very clear about what he should do now. Improve his battle strength and sublimate his space. The time in the hourglass was not short. It was enough for him to improve his space attainment greatly, especially when he had a pinnacle true treasure of the space type. If he could comprehend all of them, combined with the Golden Dragon mark and the Black Vortex, he would have an advantage even in a face-to-face battle. Wu Hao is really something. When he died, he left me a good mid-level pinnacle true treasure, and it's a domain type. He can unleash the power of a high-level pinnacle true treasure. If I comprehend all of them, I will definitely be able to unleash the power of a top-level pinnacle true treasure. With the domain advantage, if I fight with Hun Chi, I can at least shorten the gap between us. Lin Feng quickly refined the mid-level pinnacle true treasure, all thoughts vanity. He seized the remaining time to improve his space attainment and cultivate the space ability perfectly. The time in the hourglass was getting less and less. Lin Feng's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. Not only did he completely master the pinnacle true treasure all thoughts vanity, but his ultimate ability could be unleashed instantly. Even the cultivation of the mid-level pinnacle true treasure Three Souls Heavenly Bell had improved greatly. His Black Vortex had perfectly integrated space and time. While he was working hard to improve, his heart suddenly trembled. A strong force descended like the sky, full of violence and arrogance, pointing to the sky. Chapter 2238. He had come out. When the huge hourglass in his mind was about to run out, he had come out of the space of consciousness. He had almost completed an impossible task. In such a limited time, he had grasped all 100,000 origins and comprehended and aligned with the Golden Dragon mark. He had done what others could not. Arrogant and domineering, but his ability was indeed outstanding. As an invincible existence in the God-fallen world, and the only peak god before the reincarnation of destiny, Hun Yu did not have an undeserved reputation. He was the real deal. Whether it was strength, potential, comprehension, wisdom, or other aspects, he was invincible. He was a special life form, the most outstanding life form born on a wandering planet. It is indeed not cheap, Lin Feng sighed. If it were him, it would be impossible for him to come out of the space of consciousness in such a short time. It was precisely because he had comprehended and analyzed 100,000 origins that he knew how difficult it was. Although the space of consciousness was the best place for analysis, it was much more difficult to analyze 100,000 origins than other elemental laws. Not to mention that in addition to analyzing 100,000 origins, he also had to comprehend and align with the Golden Dragon mark. Even if the supreme law of the wandering planet treated Hun Yu well and gave him some convenience, it was enough to show Hun Yu's heaven-defying ability. It was amazing. As expected, the first threshold of the sixth path of reincarnation is still not enough to defeat him. Lin Feng had long been mentally prepared. Even if someone as strong as Hun Yu took the wrong path, he could still walk out of the wrong path and reach the end. In terms of the basic level, there was indeed a gap between him and himself. However, there was still a lot of distance to go this time. At least during this time, I have improved a lot in all aspects, while Hun Yu has only comprehended 100,000 origins. Lin Feng thought. In the space of consciousness, dreaming for 100 years, this short period of time was quite helpful in improving his strength. The comprehension of 100,000 origins, without the support of secret techniques and treasures, would only improve his life level and realm, but it would not be of much help to his combat strength. However, during this time, he had the Golden Dragon Mark, the most essential space of the wandering planet, and his strength had improved extraordinarily. It had greatly shortened the distance between him and Han Yu. But, with the appearance of Han Yu, the time limit was also announced. Because only he and Han Yu had taken the test of the sixth path of reincarnation, Lin Feng was not surprised. There was not much time left. Whoosh, their gazes met, and they were both different. Lin Feng saw the fighting spirit and enmity in Han Yu's eyes. For the first time, he felt Han Yu's ambition and fighting spirit, as well as the importance it attached to him. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed that he had stirred up the bastard's fighting spirit in this test. The consciousness in his mind gradually became clear, completely liberated from the space of consciousness. The feeling of his physical body was incomparably clear, as if his soul had returned. The surrounding environment rapidly changed, a vast expanse of whiteness as if he had entered the vault of heaven. Through the giant golden dragon mark, he could feel that he was already independent of the wandering planet, but at the same time, it was also under his control. A huge aura shrouded the surroundings, as if there were many light barriers that isolated everything. In this small and limited space, there was only him and bastard left. Thump! Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat as all the information entered his mind at an extremely fast speed. He instantly understood everything, including Hong Kong, who also received the same information. Fight to the death. Just like the beginning of the sixth path of reincarnation, there was no way out of this trial. There was a chance to give up in the previous 5 paths of reincarnation, but not here. Everything went according to the will of the Supreme Law, and there was only one winner. This was because the wandering planet had to choose the Emperor of Emperors. One was enough. In the normal sixth path of reincarnation, after imprinting the giant golden dragon mark, one can try to merge with the wandering planet, connect with its heart, refine its core, and control the wandering planet. But not now. Lin Feng understood, and so did Hong Kong. This was because only one person was qualified to control and refine the wandering planet at the same time. Now they needed to determine the strongest of the strongest, who was the most qualified. There were no superfluous words. Everything would be done with their fists. Just like the fourth path of reincarnation, this was the most direct conversation. The winner was king and the loser was a bandit. They would lose their qualifications, die, and be eliminated, and the winner would obtain the qualification to refine the wandering planet and undergo the final test. Boom! Hong Kong's aura instantly erupted, and his clear eyes looked straight at Lin Feng without any contempt. Anyone who could reach this point was definitely not weak. That was close. Lin Feng shuddered inwardly. He had guessed that this day would come. Fortunately, during the first test of the sixth path of reincarnation, he had so much time to prepare, and now he was qualified to compete with Hong Kong. If they had fought from the beginning, he would have died without a doubt. But now, at least he had the power to fight. Since he was going to fight, there was no need to hesitate, and there was no need for any unnecessary mercy. There was only one rule here, and that was to kill the opponent. 10,000 years is nothing. Lin Feng released the space domain at the fastest speed. He took the space domain from Wu Hao's mid-level pinnacle true treasure, and now not only was it perfectly compatible, but he also mastered all its abilities. The strongest domain, driven by the giant golden dragon mark, erupted with the essential power of the wandering planet, and the power was no less than that of a top-level pinnacle true treasure. Crack, crack, crack. The endless ground seemed to crack, and the surrounding space elements gathered from all directions, forming a tangible space. Lines of engravings shone like fireworks, perfect and flawless. Space Law Array. With Lin Feng's current cultivation, he could already perform it perfectly. Like countless soldiers arranged in an array, it was extraordinarily orderly and disciplined. The shining engravings in the entire encirclement shrouded Hun Kong, and the latter's body shone with a unique light, trying its best to resist the pressure from the outside. It was effective. Even if Hun Kong was a pinnacle god spirit and had even cultivated to the limit of a pinnacle god spirit, Lin Feng, with the help of the giant golden dragon mark and the power of the pinnacle true treasure, still caused great trouble for Hun Kong. This is just the beginning. Lin Feng felt the power of the domain and smiled slightly. 10,000 years is nothing, and the real power had not been unleashed yet. Roar! Hun Kong roared toward the sky. His whole body shone with golden light, and his muscles were bulging. He had to attack. Limited by the domain, he was constantly consuming power. Hun Kong clearly knew that this human space energy was inexhaustible because he had the giant golden dragon mark. Here, the opponent took advantage of the geographical advantage and fully displayed his space attainment. Not simple at all. Hun Kong had always attached great importance to an opponent, but just like before at the first threshold, his ambition was aroused, and he burst out like a trapped beast. Kill! Hun Kong attacked with all his strength. Chapter 2239. Just in time. With the support of the domain and the perfect use of the golden dragon mark, Lin Feng had the absolute advantage and was confident he could compete with Hun Kong. There was no need to dodge, as he was the strongest in close combat. Hating attacked, and the 10,000 obscuring heavenly blade followed him like a shadow. Now, he had almost fully comprehended the light and darkness great Daos, and 11 of the 12 great Daos had reached 100,000 origins. He had even begun to comprehend the most difficult sixth move of the 10,000 obscuring heavenly blade. Previously, he had dreamt for 100 years in the space of consciousness. Although his strength couldn't advance, it was excellent for the sublimation of his consciousness and realm. He had almost fully comprehended the two pinnacle true treasures. He had almost mastered the sixth move of the 10,000 obscuring heavenly blade. It was only because he couldn't really connect with the light and darkness origins in his consciousness state that he couldn't completely master it. It was the same for the 9 heavens of light and darkness cultivation. If he cultivated normally, with the unique effect of dreaming for 100 years, he could at least master the first heaven of light and darkness. What Lin Feng lacked the most now was time. Purring! Purring! As soon as they exchanged blows, Lin Feng felt a powerful pressure coming from Hun Kong. Such a special life form's physical strength had reached an incredible level. Although his body had evolved continuously, his life form level had just entered the God Spirit stage and couldn't be compared to Hun Kong, who was at the peak of the God Spirit limit. A special life form blessed by nature didn't need any heaven and earth fruit. As long as it grew to the peak, its body would evolve to the strongest. In addition, Hun Kong had also been baptized by the universe's chaotic energy, which made its body even more monstrous. If I hadn't experienced the universe's chaotic energy 3 times, I would have lost this battle just by breaking through the Tao with strength. Lin Feng was weaker than Hun Kong in all aspects, but because of the amplification and suppression of the domain, the difference wasn't very big. The gap was visible to the naked eye. If he didn't have enough strength, he would make up for it with skills. Special life forms were blessed by the heavens. Their bodies were strong, and their talents were even stronger. However, they were inferior in all aspects, so they couldn't compare to human experts who were proficient in this path. In particular, Lin Feng was one of the best. Since he was young, he had been advancing and improving through battle after battle. Boom! 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 The 10,000 obscuring heavenly blade was perfectly executed, making up for his physical disadvantage. His refined blade moves made Hun Yu frown deeply. Every time he unleashed his strength, he felt like he couldn't fully utilize it. This human, Han Yun's face was ashen. His attacks were like 1,000 layers of waves, one after another. His physical body was a perfect combination of yin and yang. His attacks also contained strength and spatial techniques, increasing their might. But now, the main attacker was Lin Feng. With the geographical advantage, the effects of the eternal emptiness domain gradually took effect. This was a domain that gradually heated up. It was different from other domains that were getting weaker and weaker. Instead, it would become stronger and stronger as it absorbed the spatial energy. The domain itself was guided by the spatial laws of array formation, forming a perfect cycle. Moreover, it would also absorb the excess power of both parties in the battle and turn it into its own. In addition, Lin Feng also had the golden mark, and the endless energy he obtained from the wandering planets had greatly increased the power of the infinite years of emptiness. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. There were 4 levels, and each level's engravings were several times more complicated. When all the engravings were lit up, the effect of the infinite years of emptiness could be fully utilized. When it reached the extreme, the ultimate power would be revealed. When Wu Hao used it, it only showed the power of 10 years. Firstly, he didn't have the complete mastery of the domain. Secondly, he didn't have the golden mark to provide an endless supply of energy. Thirdly, his battle with Lin Feng was too short. A bright pearl covered in dust. If the infinite years of emptiness could be fully utilized, it would be comparable to a peak senior true treasure. Now, in Lin Feng's hands, it was like a flower blooming, and its power was fully released. From 10 years to 100 years, the engravings lit up. As the battle went on, from 100 years to 1,000 years, the engravings lit up, and the power of the array increased. It brought more and more restraint and pressure to Han Yu, and his expression became more and more serious. How can this be? Han Yu could already feel the heaviness in his body. The opponent this time was completely different from the ones he had fought before. It was much more terrifying, and he had unknowingly set up an inescapable net. Break for me. Han Yu quickly found the source, but his explosive attack wasn't enough to break the domain, because Lin Feng didn't give him the chance at all. Chi, chi, chi. Rays of blade light shrouded the sky and earth, and Lin Feng gradually gained the upper hand. The stronger the power of the domain, the stronger Lin Feng's combat power. At first, he was slightly at a disadvantage, but now they were evenly matched. As the engravings shone brighter, Lin Feng's advantage grew. Han Yu wasn't willing to wait for death. If I didn't unleash my bloodline when I was comprehending it, how could this be? He had more than enough heart, but not enough strength. Lin Feng's guess was right. With Han Yu's true ability, it wasn't enough to pass the first threshold of the 6th path of reincarnation, and Han Yu himself knew it very well. That was why he unleashed his bloodline. Even though he had passed the first threshold and mastered the 100,000 origins of space, Han Yu's current combat power was weakened. The existence of the time limit didn't give him any time to recover. Originally, he didn't think much of it. Even if he only had 90% of his strength, he was still invincible. But after encountering Lin Feng in this battle, Han Yu discovered that for the first time in his life, he was powerless. It wasn't that he was weak, but that his opponent was unexpectedly strong. A mere lowly human actually has such strength. Biting the tip of his tongue, Han Yu unleashed his full strength, even at the cost of his vitality. This was because he knew that if this continued, the situation would only become worse. This was because he couldn't break through his opponent's domain. Most importantly, this domain had caused him a great deal of suppression and damage. He had to end this battle as soon as possible. It's unleashed. When the enemy retreats, I advance. When the enemy advances, I retreat. Lin Feng was well versed in this Tao, and his use of the blade technique became smoother and smoother. He could use the first 5 moves of the myriad obscuring heavenly blade with his heart, except for the third move, Mandarin Duck Tai, because he hadn't completely comprehended the Tao of darkness. But with each battle, the use of Mandarin duck Tai gradually approached perfection. Even though the 100,000 origin realm was not enough, actual battle was the best method of improvement. Lin Feng gradually grasped the true essence of Mandarin duck Tai. As he blocked Han Yu's attacks, his comprehension of the myriad obscuring heavenly blade increased extremely quickly. The first 5 moves are the entirety of the myriad obscuring heavenly blade. The 6th move combines the entirety of the myriad obscuring heavenly blade's essence. This move clearly flashed through Lin Feng's head. His comprehension of the blade was powerful enough, and his comprehension of actual battle was plentiful enough. Hating basically didn't need any technique at all. His comprehension of the Tao of light and darkness had reached perfection. Boom! The strike was unleashed as he wished. It rumbled like thunder, directly pushing Han Yu back. Impossible! Han Yu paled. For the first time, he felt a sliver of desolation as he trembled slightly. Chapter 2240. The first time, he successfully used it. Even though Lin Feng had comprehended the 10,000 obscuring heavenly blade, the mysterious and powerful 6th move seemed to only exist in an illusion and did not have a physical form. He had comprehended it countless times in the dream of 100 years, but it still lacked the concept of actual combat. But today, under Han Yu's constant pressure, he finally succeeded in using it. Since it was comprehended in the cycle of destiny, let's call it breaking destiny. Lin Feng held Black Tigress, his fighting spirit surging. He did not believe in destiny. Even though Hunchong had the absolute advantage in this cycle of destiny, he had been able to reverse the situation step by step until now. Who could have imagined that he could fight Han Yu as an equal? Who could have imagined that he could force Han Yu to use his strongest bloodline and still not gain the upper hand? Again, Lin Feng shouted, his fighting spirit surging. Black Tigress felt its master's fighting spirit. Combined with the power of the 10,000 years empty domain, it suppressed Han Yu's attacks and fought evenly with Han Yu again. Boom! Boom! Lin Feng and Han Yu both retreated, but their expressions were different. It looked like Han Yu still had the upper hand, but he knew the real situation best. His face that had never changed was filled with shock. He had never imagined that the opponent would be so strong. He had used all his bloodline. His opponent was still maintaining the same level of strength. His sharp saber moves were on par with him, and he was only slightly at a disadvantage. Such a situation was unprecedented. How is this possible? Han Yu clenched his teeth. Although Lin Feng had forced him to use his strongest combat strength, if he still couldn't defeat Lin Feng, then his arrogant self-esteem would suffer an even greater blow. Even the tower of confidence that he had built all this time was trembling slightly. Han Yu's movements became more hesitant. Even someone as strong as Han Yu had never encountered such a situation. His heart was completely shaken. At this moment, Lin Feng didn't pay attention to the injuries on his body in the slightest. His thunderous attacks struck out once more, and they were even stronger and more forceful than before. His imposing aura was even stronger, and it seemed to intend to destroy everything. Boom! 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 Han Yu and Lin Feng clashed head-on like two stars colliding. Neither could do anything to the other. Although Han Yu was stronger, Lin Feng's saber moves were extremely refined, making it difficult for Han Yu to break through. Coupled with the current situation, his confidence had already been shaken and was no longer unbreakable. The pressure brought about by 10,000 years of emptiness grew stronger with each wave. Why are his saber moves getting stronger and stronger? The more Hanju fought, the more frightened it became. The pressure multiplied. It did not know if it was an illusion, the increase in the pressure of the domain, or the change in the sword move. Boom! Lin Feng had finally defeated the bastard. The power of heaven's will was gradually increasing. Just like Lin Feng's confidence, it was invincible. Even Hun Kong was no exception. In Lin Feng's eyes, there was only battle, only victory, no matter who his opponent was. His condition was getting better and better. Actual combat allowed the knife skills to evolve even more. Han Zhu was right. The power of break destiny was gradually increasing because Lin Feng kept perfecting the knife skills in actual combat, making the knife skills more perfect. The great Tao of the Light Divine and the great Tao of Darkness had already reached 100,000 origin realm. Lin Feng's grasp of the great Tao of Light and Darkness had already reached the peak. He was almost at the first heaven of light and darkness. The great Tao of the Light Divine and the great Tao of Darkness seemed to have the greatest gap. They had nothing in common and were the most difficult to fuse. But in reality they were the easiest to fuse. This was because they represented the great Tao of Light and the great Tao of Darkness. With the help of the seventh stage of basic fusion, fuse as one, the commonality of the saber moves, and the strong sense of compatibility brought about by the first 5 moves of the 10,000 obscuring heavenly saber, Lin Feng gradually perfected the 6th move of the 10,000 obscuring heavenly saber, Heaven's Will. The most direct result was that the power increased again and again. It was like climbing a tall tower. Step by step, he climbed to the top and unleashed the power of Heaven's Will to the extreme. It was perfect. Boom! Lin Feng's saber strike, which contained all its might, pressed forward courageously, breaking through everything. The first 5 moves of the Heaven's Will turned into a single saber move in his mind. The great Tao was simple. The great Tao of Light and the great Tao of Darkness were connected. The essence of the 6th move, Heaven's Will, completely erupted. Roar! A painful roar sounded. The golden light surrounded Han Yu. He was directly defeated by Lin Feng's saber move. His skin and flesh were lacerated, and his eyes were red. He was in disbelief. Even the spatial elements around his body were trembling. Impossible! Han Yu was chosen by the heavens. I'm the chosen one. I definitely won't lose to a mere human. This is impossible. Boom! With another slash, Lin Feng directly shattered Han Yu's golden light and broke the defense he was so proud of. Boom! With the 3rd slash, Heiting was like a blood-sucking devil. He cut Han Wu's powerful body into pieces. The bloody scene was unbearable to look at. The blood turned into a bloody mist that spread through the air. Han Wu's painful roar shook the world and the wandering planet seemed to become silent. Due to the restrictions of the supreme rules, this was a fair battle. Even if Han Yu was born from a wandering planet and enjoyed the highest standards of treatment and had a connection with the wandering planet, rules were rules. They wouldn't change because of his birth. Rip! Han Yu was slashed again and fell into a pool of blood. The 4th slash should have completely torn Han Yu apart and taken his life. With Han Yu's current strength, he couldn't resist at all. However, he didn't die. He was only seriously injured and his life was in danger. Shua! Lin Feng floated in the air with a sharp gaze. He looked down like an emperor. Han Yu's weak aura was below his feet. Even if he was seriously injured, he still had his pride and self-esteem. He knelt on one knee and hammered his bloody iron fists on the ground. He would rather die than bend. He was the chosen one. He was the most powerful special life form that had been born on a wandering planet by the heavens and earth. Even if he died today, he wouldn't frown, let alone lose his self-esteem. Even if he died, he would die with a bang. Han Yu. Lin Feng whispered his name. He was in peak condition. He thought it would be an extremely difficult battle. Even if he could win, it would be a tragic and bloody victory. He didn't expect the result to be like this. The effect of the dream of 100 years and the time saved from the first threshold of the 6th reincarnation allowed his combat power to rise to a whole new level. The suppression of the pinnacle true treasure gave him an absolute advantage. He won this battle very easily. But at the same time, he won by luck. If it was outside, the outcome would still be hard to predict. He and Han Yu were on par. But in this place, the victor was king while the loser was in the wrong, so there was nothing to be said about it. He only had to descend with a single strike of his saber to annihilate Hunchong and cause his soul to disperse. He would become the only strong person to pass all 6 reincarnations. He would refine the wandering planet's core and reach the top. Chapter 2241. Are you willing to submit? Lin Feng looked at Hun Yu and threw out an olive branch. It was reasonable for him to want to subdue Hun Yu. Not only could he increase his current strength, but with Hun Yu's talent, he could also become his helper in the future. If not for the rules, he didn't need to do this. As long as he could become the master of the wandering planet, all the lives on the wandering planet would be under his rule. The problem was that the rules had to end with one side dying. Submitting was the return of the soul, which was also a kind of death. If he could subdue Hun Yu, it would be the best. Humph! The contempt and disdain that came from the bottom of Huancheng's heart did not even raise his head. His most direct reaction was to reject Lin Feng's recruitment without hesitation. How could a proud son of heaven submit to a mere human? Even if he was severely injured, even if he was only one step away from death, Hun Yu wouldn't even frown. Lin Feng was not moved, nor was he surprised. This was an answer that could be guessed. If that's the case, let's see how lucky I am. Hun Yu was very decisive, but Lin Feng was also very decisive. His eyes flashed and he directly used the 3rd level of the mind arrow of Kunling, attacking Hun Yu who was already severely injured. Soul attack. And it wasn't a normal soul attack. The black vortex spun rapidly and the energy of the 5th stage was displayed. The powerful and endless space energy brought by the Golden Dragon was converted into the purest origin energy by the Black Vortex, displaying the most powerful ability of the 3-soul Heavenly Bell, Tian Hun Yu. Used on the soul, it had the ability to support and attack. This was originally a move that would destroy everything, but as a support and not an attack, it could remove the dregs and extract the essence, adding it to the mind arrow of Kunling to make up for the only flaw. Right now, Tianhun Yao only had a pure foundation, and his power was gradually strengthened. Its power was extremely terrifying. Boom! Hun Kong's huge body trembled violently. His face paled as he coughed up blood. His body was on the verge of collapsing. He had never thought that Lin Feng would use a soul attack. Moreover, he couldn't resist it at all. He was like a fish on a chopping block. He was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His soul power had been greatly reduced. Adding the additional power from Lin Feng's heavenly soul spear, the power of the Kunling heart arrow had increased exponentially. The first strike had already caused Huancheng's soul to suffer heavy injuries, and his injuries were too horrible to look at. So tough. Lin Feng could feel the unyielding will of Huancheng. Not only was his physical body strong, but his soul was also strong. His willpower was also unparalleled. It was almost impossible to force such an expert to submit. Lin Feng also tried his best. The more difficult it was, the more he would gain if he succeeded. In any case, he had already won this battle. Regardless of whether or not he could subdue the chaotic Ho, it did not make much of a difference. Boom! The second Kunling heart arrow. He did not care if he would destroy Hunga's soul. He could not care so much at the moment. He clearly knew that the only way to subdue Hungu was to make its soul fall into a complete slumber and its will collapse. However, he could not kill it. It was very difficult. In addition, the bastard had a tough personality and would rather die than submit. This made it even more difficult. He was not dead yet. With a heavily injured body, he took 2 strikes of Lin Feng's Kunling heart arrow and Tianhun Yao's 3rd strike. Yet, Huncheng was still able to maintain his willpower and his heroic spirit did not disperse. Even though Lin Feng was his enemy, he was secretly impressed by his fighting spirit. His willpower was not below his own. Last strike. Lin Feng's soul attack had also reached its limit. The third Kuan Ling heart arrow had consumed 90% of his soul energy. In his current state, he could only ensure that he would not fall into a deep slumber. However, he did not need to fight in the next stage. Hence, he could give it his all. No matter if he succeeded or not, at least he would not regret it. Roar! Hunchong seemed to have felt it too. The feeling of reaching its limit. Only the last layer of his consciousness was left. It would break with a poke, and his soul was completely scattered. In addition to his heavy injuries, it was even worse. He could not withstand Lin Feng's soul attack anymore. However, Hunchong was not willing to submit. He would rather die than submit to a mere human. 10,000 years of emptiness was completely lit up. Time gradually passed. Even Lin Feng did not notice that it had reached the fourth stage, 10,000 years. The golden dragon was connected to a wandering planet, and the power of 10,000 years of emptiness was unleashed to the extreme. Rumble, Huanchong's final resistance was suppressed by the domain. The will tower that he had built up with his last breath collapsed. Suddenly, he felt an incomparable pain in his mind. It was a familiar feeling. His soul force felt like it was being nibbled away by endless space worms. Huanwu wailed as it fell to the ground, its aura completely gone. Dead? No, he's not dead. Lin Feng sighed inwardly. This kind of injury, if it was any other human expert, would definitely die. Only Hunchong, the most powerful special life form, was able to survive. His body had completely collapsed, and his soul energy was gone. Shua! Lin Feng forcefully fused with Hunchong and formed a soul contract with him. With his current soul energy, he could definitely do so. However, the price would be great. It would consume 90% of his soul energy. It was an undeniably huge consumption. Huanchong's soul was seriously injured, and he was in a deep sleep. Whether he could wake up was still unknown. However, he was willing to take a gamble. When Hunchong woke up one day, he would definitely become his right-hand man. Shua! Hua! Enduring the pain in his soul and the endless drowsiness, Lin Feng quickly swallowed the insect spirit inner core to replenish his soul energy. He was preparing for the final refinement of the heavenly fate reincarnation. He had come prepared. If he did not have a certain amount of confidence, he would not take such a huge risk and forcefully fuse with Hunchong. Huanchong's body gradually disappeared from this space. He had been subdued by Lin Feng. However, he was already unconscious and was of no use. A voice sounded in his mind. It was extremely pleasing to the ear and filled with joy. In the depths of his soul, the golden dragon mark seemed to be roaring excitedly. It's a wandering planet. Lin Feng felt that the will of the wandering planet was jubilant, as if it was cheering for him. Over the endless years, how many heavenly fate reincarnation had there been? There were very few who could reach the sixth heavenly fate reincarnation. Those who could reach the last stage and fuse with the golden dragon were even rarer, and none of them could complete the last step. Many experts with similar strength to Hunchong had their wings broken at the last stage. They could not refine the wandering planet's core and complete the last step, leading to their destruction. The last stage was definitely not easy to pass. Lin Feng was very clear. However, he also knew that there was no free lunch in the world. The more dangerous the obstacles, the more the final harvest and the greater the achievement. If he did not risk his life, how could he succeed? Come! Lin Feng pursed his lips tightly, his fighting spirit high. Chapter 2242. Wandering Planet. Ever since it was born, it had been wandering the universe, hence its name. There were all sorts of strange things in the universe, and the planets that were born were not all the same. Wandering planets were one of the most special ones. They were rare life planets and had strong vitality, able to give birth to life on their own. Furthermore, they were different from ordinary life planets. Wandering planets were basically life planets of 6 stars and above. As time passed, the space energy would increase, and their vitality would increase until they reached 9 stars. However, if it was a 9-star wandering planet, it would have a basic consciousness. At that time, unless one was an almighty, it was basically impossible to refine the core of a wandering planet and become its controller. Lin Feng was very clear. Fortunately, this wandering planet was an 8-star life planet and had yet to reach 9 stars. After the awakening of his bloodline and the rich knowledge in the Wan Qian path, Lin Feng had a lot of understanding of wandering planet. An almighty was an even more terrifying existence than ancestor Wan Qian. To such an expert, they had already transcended the universe and could easily control everything in the universe, including wandering planets. Even Ancestor was unable to encounter a wandering planet in his entire life. The universe was too big. The birth of a wandering planet was extremely rare. It was formed from space elements and was a special planet derived from space laws. It was blessed by the heavens. The probability of encountering a wandering planet in the vast universe was extremely low. A true treasure. Its value is even higher than the 10,000 origin mustard stone. The 10,000 origin mustard stone is mainly used to nurture and strengthen one's soul. It is a basic upgrade, but a wandering planet is a huge carrier. It can be used as a palace or a treasure trove. It can even be used as a huge treasure. There were not many records of wandering planets in the Wan Qian path. After all, Ancestor had never seen one before. Secondly, no one had refined the core of a wandering planet and controlled it. They only knew that it was extremely precious. It could be used as a base to nurture batch after batch of experts. Other life planets would gradually wither with the passage of time, and their life energy would decrease, but wandering planets would not. The laws of time had no effect on wandering planet. As long as a wandering planet was not destroyed and absorbed enough space energy, it could grow into a 9-star life planet. A life born from a 9-star life planet that was completely loyal, how terrifying was that? Not to mention it, just the energy of the wandering planet itself was very terrifying. This was a natural holy land for cultivation. Now that it was compatible with the giant golden dragon, he could borrow a portion of the spatial energy and use the special environment to cultivate. But what if he refined the core? It wasn't just compatibility, but complete control. It was as if one was borrowing while the other was possessing everything. The difference was huge. When one's strength was weak, they could borrow the power of the wandering planet itself. When one's strength was strong, they could even control the power of the wandering planet. It could be said that before one transcended the universe, this was a huge power. But for Lin Feng, the most important thing right now was the characteristics of the wandering planet itself. Endless space. It was a small planet, but it was larger than a galaxy. It was precisely because a wandering planet was a spatial object that was boundless. If one could refine its core, it would be equivalent to having an infinitely large territory that could contain all life in the Milky Way. One had to know that whether it was the life energy or the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it was much stronger than that of the Milky Way. Living and cultivating on a wandering planet was not a problem at all. Even if we can't stop the Milky Way super black hole from dying, exploding, and collapsing, at least we can save the lives of the Milky Way. That's not bad. This time, if I don't succeed in refining the core, I'll die for a righteous cause. Lin Feng quickly recovered his soul power, and his fighting heart was firm. For him, this was a very crucial battle. It was far more important and dangerous than the battle with Hunyu, because failure meant that his body and soul would be destroyed. Even if he had another body, the consequences of failure were unimaginable. Most of his cultivation would be destroyed. But he had to fight this battle. Since he didn't believe in fate, he had to create his own destiny. The first step of refining is the compatibility of the golden dragon, connecting the body and soul with the wandering planet. If he couldn't even do the first step, he wouldn't be able to become the master of the wandering planet. According to the Wan Qian Dao, the conditions to refine a wandering planet are extremely harsh. First is the body and soul, the carrier of the wandering planet's core. If one's level isn't high enough, one will definitely die at this stage. Lin Feng was secretly shocked. He had absolute confidence in the strength of his soul. His soul was already very strong, and he had a heaven-defying treasure like the Wan Qian mustard stone. If Han Yu could refine the wandering planet's core, he would be able to do it too. But his body was a bit difficult. Strictly speaking, my body is much weaker than Han Yu's. Lin Feng knew. Because he was a human, his talent was limited. He wasn't as strong as a special life form. Moreover, his life form level wasn't high. He had just become a god, so the gap was huge. Fortunately, he had received 3 streams of chaotic energy in a row before, which had made his body transform a lot. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be qualified to take it. The soul is the key to refining the wandering planet's core. The body is secondary. There should be a chance. Lin Feng's consciousness was already immersed. Connected with the golden dragon mark, the wandering planet's consciousness was in contact. At this moment, he was in the core area of the wandering planet, which was also the center of the God-fallen world. The energy here was extremely majestic, and the space energy was so dense that it had crystallized. There was no place on the wandering planet that directly led to this place. Only those who had completed the 6 paths of reincarnation were qualified to enter. It was like the most secret room of a sect or the control room of a spaceship. In front of him was an incomparably huge golden dragon. It was mighty and majestic. It seemed to be real, but it wasn't. It was made of endless space energy. Its entire body was made of space crystals and was extremely pure. Every space crystal was the most original existence of space, and its value was difficult to estimate. The golden dragon form seemed to be the heart of the wandering planet. It was very similar to his golden mark. Their eyes met, and they seemed to be able to sense each other. Swish! Suddenly, the dragon's eyes widened, and the surrounding space energy surged like a tide. It was as if the power of the entire wandering planet was coming from all directions. The power was boundless. Okay. Lin Feng's eyes shone as he stood upright. The refining of the wandering planet's core had begun. Chapter 2243. The endless pressure was like a collapsing planet. The terrifying weight seemed to be able to crush people into pieces. Even though Lin Feng's physical body was so strong that it was comparable to a peak god-level special life form, he still felt very strenuous. The most terrifying thing was that this huge pressure was gradually increasing. It was as if there were countless walls in all directions, desperately squeezing toward the center. Ah! The pure pain from the physical body made Lin Feng cry out involuntarily. This pressure was unprecedentedly huge and terrifying. Previously, it was completely unimaginable that with his current physical strength, he could not withstand it at all. At the same time, the pressure from his soul had also begun. It was like countless thin needles piercing into his soul. The pain was unbearable, and it was extremely itchy. It was as if a brand was engraved on his soul. That feeling made his hair stand on end, and his entire body trembled. The feeling of being pierced by needles was extremely sharp, mixed with intense pain. It was a two-pronged attack with his physical body. Inhuman pain. In an instant, Lin Feng understood why no powerhouse had been able to refine the wandering planet core and control everything until now. The more opportunities the heavens gave you, the more powerful the tempering would be. No fortuitous encounter was inevitable, especially when the wandering planet was part of the universe's origin. To obtain such an opportunity, the price would definitely not be small. Endure. Lin Feng gritted his teeth. The tempering since he was young had given him a tenacious will, and this was exactly what was needed to refine the wandering planet core. Without a strong will, it was impossible to succeed. Whether it was the physical body or the soul, all the pressure was closely related to one's will. If one's will was strong enough, the pain would be shared enough. The more the two could endure, the longer they could last. I don't know how long it will take. Lin Feng was completely unsure. According to the description in the Myriad Heaven Path, there were 3 major thresholds in refining the core of a wandering planet. It was a situation of 9 deaths and 1 life. The first threshold was the beginning, the boundless pressure and pain that directly affected the body and soul. An ordinary expert, even a pinnacle deity, would most likely fall at this threshold. This was because the pressure and pain were sudden and did not increase little by little. It did not give one time to prepare at all. It was like a sudden death, extremely terrifying. I should have passed the first threshold. Lin Feng had already calmed down. Although the pain was still very frightening and was constantly taking effect, the feeling of seconds passing like years had already disappeared. Although the pain was frightening, he could still endure it with his willpower, especially when it came to his soul. My soul is indeed much stronger than my physical body. The pressure of a wandering planet's will on the soul was far less than that of the physical body. It was not that there was a gap between the two, but that his soul was strong, and his physical body was relatively weak. That was why he felt this way now. From the first threshold to the second, the pain gradually increased. If the pressure at the beginning is to endure the strongest storm, then what you have to endure before the second threshold is a storm that gradually grows stronger. It tests your willpower and the maximum pressure you can endure. Lin Feng was confident in his soul. However, in terms of his physical body, he had no confidence at all. That was because he had almost reached a critical point. If he continued, he did not know if he could succeed. This was related to the limits of his physical body and his willpower. What could he do? What if I split a part of my consciousness and cultivate on the wandering planet through the golden dragon mark? Lin Feng suddenly had an idea as he pondered. He was very clear about his current situation. Even if he split a part of his consciousness and soul, it would not be a problem to resist the pain and pressure from the wandering planet. However, his physical body had reached its limit and he could not move. My current life level is at the elementary level of a god. If I have enough time to cultivate, it is completely possible for me to be promoted to an intermediate god. Although it is only a small improvement, if I succeed, my physical body can at least be promoted to another level. Lin Feng's face was as iron as the pressure continued to increase. One level was very small. However, the difference right now might be such a small gap. It was like an ordinary person walking in the desert. He had exhausted all the water he brought and was on the verge of reaching his limit, but he was very close to walking out of the desert. He only needed a little bit of water to survive. It was the same for him right now. Let's try. Lin Feng thought carefully and made a decision. His soul consciousness passed through the golden dragon mark and instantly sensed the entire wandering planet. Even if he was in the state of refinement, he was not affected. His soul consciousness instantly sensed and left the god-fallen world, arriving at a dark place where the sun could not be seen. This was the deepest part of the heavenly meteor turbulence impasse, a dark cave that could not see the sun all year round. It looked ordinary, but it was actually filled with dark land serene grasses. This was a very strange dark-type plant. It grew by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and emitted pure dark elemental energy. The dark land serene grasses here were densely packed and innumerable. If not for the golden dragon mark, it would be impossible to find such a dark-type treasure land. Because it was in a completely sealed state, the dark-type energy was extremely pure and dense. It was the best among the wandering planets, even better than the other 7 impasse. This is the place. Lin Feng's figure blurred and landed in the dark cave. With a thought, not only did his consciousness appear, but his physical body also appeared. There was no fixed location for the final refinement of the wandering planet. As long as one did not leave the wandering planet, the refinement would continue. Moreover, it was impossible to leave the wandering planet. However, the original location had the densest spiritual energy of heaven and earth. For most experts, it was the best place for refinement. But here, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was far inferior to the God-fallen world. Whether I succeed or not will depend on this. Lin Feng pursed his lips. He directly split 50% of his soul consciousness to cultivate the last Tao of the 6 paths of darkness that he had yet to comprehend, the Tao of darkness. He had completely comprehended the 6 paths of light. The 6 paths of darkness only lacked the Tao of darkness. Lin Feng knew very well what would happen when he comprehended all 6 paths of the great Tao of light to 100,000. It would be an extreme transformation. His bloodline and life level would increase greatly. The divine pattern of light was like this. It was once far below the dark pattern of light. However, when he comprehended the 6 paths of light, he surpassed the dark pattern of light and reached the limit of the 5th stage. Now, he was even suppressing the dark pattern of light. His dark pattern of light was already very strong. If he could comprehend the last Tao of darkness and combine the 6 paths, the dark pattern of light would definitely transform and reach the limit. It might even surpass the divine pattern of light. His life level would increase greatly. This was the safest path. It was also the path that he had the highest chance of succeeding. I will definitely succeed. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with absolute confidence. He had no way out now. He had to comprehend the Tao of darkness to reach 100,000 origin realm before his body reached the limit. Not only did he have to succeed, but he had to succeed. Chapter 2244. When a person was 100% determined to do something, the probability of success was very high. Especially when it came to himself, he definitely had the ability to do it. The right time, the right place, and the right people were all there. Lin Feng rationally allocated his resources and used 50% of his soul consciousness. At this moment, the existence of the Golden Dragon mark was also of great help, allowing him to find such a special place to cultivate. Otherwise, even if he wanted to, he would be powerless. Shua, 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 shua. Lin Feng's comprehension progressed rapidly. The endless pain intensified, and the strong pressure forced him to move forward. This proved that a person's potential was limitless, and it was forced out. Under normal circumstances, Lin Feng might not be able to comprehend the 100,000 origins of the Tao of heavy darkness even in 1,000 years, even in such an extreme environment. After all, simply dissecting the 100,000 origins was far from comparable to refining the sovereign Bloodfang horn. But now, in just half a year, he had already dissected all 100,000 origins of the path of heavy darkness. The efficiency was heaven-defying and terrifying, even faster than refining the supreme blood-maned horn. Faster! 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 Lin Feng's skin had already cracked, and blood was seeping out. His blood vessels were bulging, and his entire body was trembling violently. His soul had not reached its limit, but after 100 years, even with the addition of his willpower, his body had also reached its limit. He had to cross this threshold. Otherwise, he would definitely die. 60%. 70%. Lin Feng gave it his all. His soul consciousness deviated greatly, and he separated it to comprehend the path of heavy darkness, forming the final law all. At this moment, he could not care so much. He could only believe that his soul could hold on for a few more decades. After all, his soul was guarded by the 10,000 origin mustard stone. No matter how strong the pain was, it could at least hold on for a while. But his body could not hold on with just a pinnacle true treasure. A pinnacle true treasure was an external protection, while the pain and pressure came from within. It was completely different, and its grade was not at the same level as the 10,000 origin mustard stone. 80%. I will definitely form the law all. Lin Feng's eyes were red, and he was fully committed to this fight. His body and soul had both reached their limits, and he was getting closer and closer to the second threshold. Time passed year by year. But to Lin Feng, every year was longer than 10,000 years, and every second was the most terrifying torture. Hua the dark mageweth shone brightly. Lin Feng's persistence finally paid off. 22 years. After analyzing the 100,000 origins of the Tao of Weight of Darkness, Lin Feng had condensed the law all. Although it was incomparably rough, and could not be compared to the supreme blood-curdling horn's law all, he had still succeeded. In less than half the time it took to refine the sovereign blood centipede horn, he managed to comprehend 100,000 origins of the Tao of Heavy Darkness. It was simply inconceivable. In fact, even Lin Feng himself couldn't believe it. However, he did succeed. Sweet dew fell from the sky, nourishing his weak body that had reached its limit and was on the verge of fainting. It was as if he was bathing in the chaotic energy of the world. At this moment, Lin Feng finally let out a long sigh of relief, as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart. The dark demonic patterns lit up completely, and the 6 great Daos merged into one. Almost instantly, he broke through the obstacles and reached the limit of the 5th stage. The momentum was endless, and he instantly crossed the bottleneck and reached the 6th stage. Hua hua, like flowers of the demonic world blooming, the dark demonic patterns were incomparably beautiful. The power that was previously suppressed by the divine patterns of light had now completely exceeded it. Lin Feng's body was overflowing with rich dark elements, like fairies circling around him. Outside his body, there was a sparkling black light, mysterious and terrifying. His eyes had a bloody glow, which came from the dark demonic power. Lin Feng absorbed the rich dark energy to nourish his body. Crack! Crack! Lin Feng directly plucked the dark elemental fruits of heaven and earth and swallowed them. At this moment, his life level had already advanced, smoothly reaching mid-level from low-level God. Everything was exactly as he had expected. This natural cave full of dark elements was a rare treasure in itself. He did not need to deliberately search for it, as there was endless dark energy and fruits of heaven and earth. However, even if there were none here, he could use the golden dragon mark to pluck other fruits of heaven and earth. For the current him, this was too easy. His body quickly reached its current limit, reaching the perfect mid-level God level. My current physical strength is not much worse than Han Yu's. Lin Feng showed a weak smile, very satisfied. His will was stronger than Han Yu's. Although his physical body was slightly weaker, if Han Yu could survive, he would definitely be able to too. He was getting closer and closer to the 2nd threshold. After this breakthrough, coupled with the infusion of heaven and earth energy, Lin Feng's confidence increased greatly. Although the pain was more intense than before, his perseverance had paid off. Lin Feng endured the pain and pressure and endured for a full 180 years. The 2nd threshold. Lin Feng's eyes sharpened. Although his physical body was a little tired, his soul was still in excellent condition, and his will was incomparably strong. Naturally, he was not afraid of the 2nd threshold. His body seemed to fade, and in an instant, he returned to the original place of refinement. The crystal-like golden dragon appeared in front of him again. However, compared to the first time he saw it, this golden dragon had faded a lot, as if its energy had been exhausted. Instead, the golden dragon mark in his body was brighter, its aura stronger, and its energy more terrifying. The transfer of will, the inheritance of power. Whoosh, the golden dragon was like a butterfly, fading into endless space energy, revealing a flawless milky white crystal. It was white and transparent, like the heart of the golden dragon. Countless crystal surfaces were filled with a unique aura, similar to the 10,000 origin mustard stone. This is the core? In his mind, the consciousness of a wandering planet flashed. There was no need to ask or think. Lin Feng's eyes flashed, and his soul directly enveloped this perfect crystal and began to refine it. Suddenly, the perfect crystal bloomed with boundless light and energy, as if instinctively resisting. The pain in his soul increased sharply. Lin Feng's expression was solemn, and he clenched his fists. Compared to the first threshold, the second threshold was more difficult. The soul was the foundation of a life. Refining with the soul was like fighting with everything. The slightest mistake would cause the destruction of both body and soul. Even if he could win this battle, he might be in a permanent coma and become cosmic dust. Especially for experts, there were far more who were good at the physical body than the soul. There had been more than 80,000 cycles of reincarnation, and dozens of experts had passed the first threshold. However, only 2 had passed the second threshold, and they were in the middle of the cycle. None of the closest ones had succeeded, because the wandering planet itself was growing, and it was now an 8-star life planet. Its core was much tougher than before, more than 10 times, and the increase in difficulty was simply terrifying. I will definitely pass this threshold. However, Lin Feng's eyes were filled with absolute confidence, because his strongest point was his soul. Chapter 2245. This wandering planet was already too old. From its birth until now, it had grown step by step to become an 8-star top life planet. One could imagine how tough its core was. It contained endless vitality and was flawless. It was easier said than done to refine it and imprint a part of his consciousness in it. Only Lin Feng had the ability to do so. If it were Han Yu, he might be able to pass the first threshold without any fortuitous encounters and breakthroughs, but he would definitely be defeated at the second threshold. It wasn't that Han Yu was weak. In fact, he was already the strongest special life form that the wandering planet had tried its best to cultivate. His body, soul, and even his will were extremely strong. However, it was too difficult to refine a wandering planet. If the life crystal was only at the 6-star or 7-star level, Han Yu might have a chance of succeeding. However, it was an 8-star top life form. Even if his soul was twice as strong as it was now, the chances were slim. Generally speaking, the souls of those with strong bodies were usually weaker. Those with strong souls tended to have weaker bodies. Han Yu was already a mutant, and Lin Feng was even more so. His body was only a bit weaker than Han Yu's, but his soul was much stronger. The second threshold had less to do with one's will. It was more about the characteristics of the soul itself, whether it was strong enough, whether it was compatible with the wandering planet, and whether it was recognized. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, it was a long battle. Lin Feng was like a foolish old man moving a mountain, forcibly emptying the mountain. With his original soul strength and ability, it was actually difficult to succeed. However, Lin Feng had the 10,000 origin mustard stone, a peerless treasure that was also born during the chaos of the universe. It was the best guardian of the soul. Because of the 10,000 origin mustard stone, he could slowly grind away the corners of the perfect crystal and truly embed his consciousness in it. He could occupy the core of the perfect crystal with his unique consciousness and occupy it. Finally, I made it. Lin Feng sighed. He didn't know how he had made it through the past 1,000 years. It was much more tiring than the first threshold. He had completely overcome it. There were several times when he thought he was about to fail, but the energy from the 10,000 origin mustard stone allowed him to stubbornly overcome the difficulties. No wonder there were more than 80,000 cycles of reincarnation over the endless years. Whether it's the overlords from the universe or the special life form of the wandering planet itself, only 2 people have crossed this threshold. At this moment, Lin Feng finally understood. It was too difficult for a deity to have such a powerful soul. Powerhouses beyond the level of gods were not allowed to enter the wandering planets, let alone participate in the reincarnation of destiny. The previous two people who had crossed the second threshold had only refined a 6-star or 7-star life crystal core. Compared to the difficulty of refining the life crystal core that Zhang Xian was currently refining, the difference was like heaven and earth. The third threshold. Lin Feng was already very tired, especially since his soul force had been greatly consumed. It was equivalent to 1,000 years of bitter soul cultivation, so it would be strange if he wasn't tired. However, since he had already reached this step, he naturally had to continue. There was still one final step left. Whether or not he could succeed would depend on fate. Boom! It was as if countless meteors had descended, invading his body from all aspects of the universe. They occupied his body and forcefully merged with his meridians, blood vessels, bones, muscles, and every single cell. Assimilation. After refining the perfect crystal, the wandering planet was equivalent to a part of the body. To become the controller of a wandering planet, in addition to controlling the life crystal of the wandering planet, one also had to have the ability to control it. It was like a treasure saber with a spirit. It would not allow itself to fall into the hands of an ordinary bladesman. A treasured sword full of righteousness would not allow itself to fall into the hands of evil. It was the same for a wandering planet. The third threshold was the most resolute and unyielding assimilation. If he succeeded, he would be recognized by the wandering planet, and it would offer everything it had. From then on, it would have a spirit and a master, and it would be stronger than a soul contract. Once this kind of origin consciousness born in the universe's chaos was fully recognized, it would be 100% assimilation. However, if he failed, I will never fail. Lin Feng endured the pain that was more than 10 times worse than the first threshold. His whole body trembled violently. At this moment, there was no other thought in his mind except for one: persevere. The transformation of the cells, the sharpening of the bones, the expansion of the muscles, everything was changing the gene body. This was the universe's ultimate chaos origin. If he succeeded, there would be a great change in all aspects, and he would perfectly transform into an individual life form like a wandering planet. The upper limit was infinitely high. The 3 descending chaos origins of the universe were just an appetizer. This is the true source of power. Come. Lin Feng gritted his teeth, and his eyes were bloodshot. Without the bone-chilling cold, how could he smell the fragrance of plum blossoms? He wanted to become as strong as his ancestor, or even surpass the limit and complete his ancestor's wish to become a powerful person in the universe. This was the best opportunity. Complete the transformation, strengthen the bloodline, and remove all the bottlenecks. Whoosh! Enduring the pain, Lin Feng's consciousness connected to the golden dragon mark. Instantly, his body blurred, and he came to a strange place in the god-fallen world. Here, the elements of light and darkness were mixed and extremely rich. Heaven and earth bipolar abyss. Under this abyss, instead of saying that the elements of light and darkness were mixed, it was more like 2 countries were at war all year round. Chu and Han fought, and the flames of war were everywhere. No one could do anything to the other. Lin Feng landed in the middle of the heaven and earth bipolar abyss, where the elements of light and darkness gathered the most, and quickly entered a state of cultivation. Pressure. Even he was not sure about the potential he had. 1,000 years ago, he was able to complete the analysis of 100,000 origins of the path of heavy darkness in just 122 years, causing the dark magic patterns to transform and greatly improve his life level. Today, he could also create another miracle, complete the final sprint, and overcome this almost impossible disaster. Fusion of light and darkness. I will definitely succeed. Lin Feng's face was completely red, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was completely occupied by the dark demon state, and he became even crazier. Even if the dark demon state had side effects, he could not care so much right now. If this fusion failed, then he would definitely fail the third threshold. He had no way out. Behind him was a bottomless abyss. If he took a step back, he would die without a grave. If my ancestor is here, please lend me a hand. Lin Feng's light and dark magic patterns crisscrossed and shone, and it was extremely shocking. He crazily absorbed the elements of light and darkness, bathing in the powerful energy. It was as if he was in a terrifying battlefield, and every second was torture. However, the third threshold itself was already the greatest torment. What else could the rest be compared to? He had already succeeded in the 7 basic stages of the fusion of light and darkness. Now that the 12 ways of light and darkness had all reached the origin realm and completed the transformation of his bloodline, all the factors were in place. All that was left was the final breakthrough. The 9 heavens of light and darkness. After completing the fusion of the first layer, according to his ancestors' myriad heaven path, he would be comparable to peak God. Chapter 2246. If you don't go crazy, you won't survive. This was the best portrayal of Lin Feng's current situation. The extremely harsh reincarnation conditions of a wandering planet had already pushed him to the limit. It was almost impossible to complete the refinement as a god-level life form, especially for an 8-star top life form planet. Even if one were to come from a famous family in the universe, it would be extremely rare for one to be able to do so. Lin Feng could at most be considered a native of a remote star system. But now, he was challenging this impossible task. He was destined to go crazy and risk his life. Reaching the third threshold meant that he had reached the end and was only one step away from success. The fatigue and pressure brought about by the first 2 thresholds had all turned into motivation. Lin Feng's will had been tempered to the point that it was like an indestructible saber. At this moment it was unsheathed. Meet gods, kill gods. Meet demons, kill demons. There was no way out. Lin Feng was very clear about his current situation. He had to master the ancestors' unique skill of the Wan Qian path, the first level of the 9 heavens of light and darkness. Otherwise, he would definitely die. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 5th stage of the light pattern changed rapidly. Under the stimulation of pain and pressure, and under the constant destruction and evolution of the dark pattern, it was undergoing changes. Including the 5th stage of the black vortex, it was also contributing its power. Although it was only the 5th stage, the characteristics of the black vortex itself, combined with the power of the space and time heavenly laws, was much stronger than the 6th stage of the dark pattern. Therefore, although the dark pattern wanted to suppress the light pattern, it couldn't do so. Instead, it became the catalyst for the transformation of the light pattern. In the middle of the 2 extremes of heaven and earth, it absorbed enough light element. Under the catalysis of the deepest power, the light pattern completed its transformation, crossing that point and reaching the 6th stage like the dark pattern. It was a true harmony. Previously, the 9 heavens of light and darkness was difficult to cultivate because Lin Feng's bloodline wasn't strong enough. Although the light pattern and dark pattern could also be cultivated to the 9 heavens of light and darkness at the 5th stage, it required extremely strong comprehension and control. However, Lin Feng did not have the guidance of a master after all. He had only just completed the 7 stages of the foundation based on his own comprehension. It would be extremely difficult to cultivate the 9 heavens of light and darkness. If Lin Feng was given enough time, he would be able to complete it, but time was not on his side. Fortunately, the divine rune of light and the divine rune of darkness had advanced. The 6th stage of fusion was much worse than the 5th stage. A stronger foundation, a more solid foundation, and more elemental energy meant easier fusion conditions and elements. Especially now, Lin Feng was in his best condition. Fight to the death. A person's potential could be stimulated by putting their life on the line. Lin Feng's potential was enormous, and his progress was rapid. It was just that he was limited by his bloodline and cultivation time. If Lin Feng had Huancheng's cultivation time, his strength would have long surpassed Huancheng's. He had to succeed. Lin Feng did not have a second path. The 7 stages of the foundation are the foundation of fusion. From simple to deep, the characteristics of light and darkness start from a little bit and gradually overlap to find similarities. From no connection to building a bridge, and then to perfect and flawless fusion into one. The 9 heavens of light and darkness starts from 100,000 sources, from a whole to an individual, from macroscopic to microscopic. Fusion is more delicate, more quintessential. It is the fusion of secret methods. It is like polishing parts into a whole machine. This is no longer fusion, but forming a complete and independent individual. At this moment, Lin Feng completely understood. The original fusion was like a couple going from strangers to familiar, inseparable, but no matter how good their relationship was, they were still 2 separate individuals. Their essence did not change. However, the fusion of the 9 heavens of light and darkness was a change in essence, a fusion of cells and genes, turning 2 people into one. The difference between the 2 was too great. Fortunately, he had just dissected 100,000 sources of the Tao of Darkness, causing his comprehension of the Tao of Darkness to reach 100,000 origin realm. Otherwise, even if he could cultivate the 9 heavens of light and darkness, he would not be able to dissect it at a deeper level, and the effects and speed of his cultivation would be greatly reduced. Right now, he had reached the requirements in both cultivation and strength. Perhaps it was not the best condition, but it was at least the standard condition. Arg. Ha! Lin Feng gritted his teeth tightly as he endured inhumane pain. Every single wave of pain was like a sharp blade slicing his flesh, and it was so painful that he wished he was dead. But it was precisely because of this that his will was exceptionally firm and boundlessly sharp. He was incomparably clear-headed and incomparably persistent. To Lin Feng, this was a war with no way out. Under the pressure and pain, his cultivation of the 9 heavens of light and darkness increased bit by bit, starting from 0. He only needed to use a very small portion of the 100,000 sources of light and darkness. In this aspect, he was very good at it, because before in the reincarnation of destiny, he had already tried to use the secret method of integrating the 100,000 spatial sources of light and had even clearly copied it. The golden dragon mark was like this. However, his cultivation of the 100,000 spatial sources of light was still shallow, and the golden dragon mark was even less understood. Right now, the 100,000 sources of light and darkness were very clear. How to combine, how to structure, how to balance, and how to form a common body, he knew very well. Under such conditions, he completely comprehended it, and his cultivation increased rapidly. 300 years. Only twice as long as dissecting the Tao of Darkness, Lin Feng had basically grasped the mystery of the first layer of the 9 heavens of light and darkness. He had no choice but to grasp it, because there was not much time left. His willpower and body had reached the limit, and could no longer support it. I can't die. I definitely can't die here. Lin Feng's eyes were bloodshot. At this moment, his consciousness was almost collapsing, but the energy of the dark demon state supported him. He was almost left with the comprehension of his instincts and the last bit of strength. Ding! In his mind there seemed to be an incomparably light sound, as if a huge heavenly lock had been opened, and an endless door had been opened. He walked out of the hazy sky, walked out of the endless darkness, and was endlessly bright. Whoosh, sweet dew fell from the sky, and the whole world shook. The divine pattern of light and the demonic pattern of darkness merged perfectly, emitting a different feeling. All the cells in his body were jumping with joy. The bloodshot red in Lin Feng's eyes gradually disappeared, and it was replaced by clarity and translucency. That was the sound of heaven and earth, and it was the joy that came from the endless void of the universe. Lin Feng had opened a brand new path, surpassing the limit, wandering the universe, and reaching the limit of the heavenly Tao. This path was once walked by Wan Qian, and it was a path that had already been proven. It was just that he had proven his Tao but not broken through it, but it was already extraordinary. In the vast universe, how many experts could break through? Most of them had not even found the path of proving their Tao, let alone proving their Tao. However, Lin Feng had already stepped on this path. Chapter 2247. The arrival of endless energy was a gift from the heavens. It was a gift from the universe. The chaotic energy of the universe. Lin Feng had gone through 3 baptisms, so he knew very well that the universe was maintained by the supreme rules. There would be gifts and punishments, such as wantonly destroying galaxies, slaughtering living beings, and interfering with the operation of the universe's rules. It was the same for gift. After all living beings lived in the universe and were part of everything in the universe. The comprehension of the Great Path was one of them, and so was the comprehension of the heavenly way. And now, he had embarked on the ultimate path of the universe, reaching the limit of the heavenly way and living with the universe. Naturally, the supreme rules were overjoyed and gave him gift. In other words, the chaotic energy of the universe that he had gone through baptism was already one of the purest and strongest energies in the universe. Just in time. After going through the baptism of the chaotic energy of the universe, Lin Feng's life level had not only undergone a great transformation, but his abilities had also undergone a great change, especially the light god's pattern and the dark god's pattern, which had undergone the most thorough changes. An invisible rule connected the two and assimilated them, just like the assimilation of the space law and time law in the black vortex. However, compared to the communication in the black vortex, the assimilation of the light god's pattern and the dark god's pattern was much more complicated and brilliant, and the power produced by the assimilation was also much stronger. A brand new power. Just like the black vortex, the light element and the dark element will be indistinguishable from each other in the future. No matter what kind of energy I absorb and cultivate, it will be my light and darkness bloodline that will improve, including when I fight. Just like the cultivation of the inner force cultivation method, when he fought in the future, no matter what moves he used, he would use the light and darkness bloodline, and the power that erupted would be the first heaven of light and darkness. The power was more than 10 times stronger than the 7th stage of the basic fusion. After going through the baptism of the chaotic energy of the universe, the light god's pattern and the dark god's pattern were closely connected and became extremely complicated. Every intersection point was connected by the chaotic energy of the universe, forming a powerful entity. No wonder the ancestor of the Thousand Heaven Path said that when one cultivates the first heaven of light and darkness, one's combat power would be comparable to a peak god. Lin Feng smiled. It was more than a peak god. Just the power of the first level of light and darkness was already at the pinnacle of deity level. In addition to his original physical body foundation, soul attack, blade technique realm, and all 6 moves of the myriad obscuring heavenly blade, his current combat strength was far beyond the pinnacle of deity level. My life form has risen to the next level. I'm now a high-level god. Taking into account the transformation and strengthening of my physical body and the baptism of the primal chaos energy, my current combat strength should have reached the level of a heavenly god, far surpassing what it was before. Lin Feng was very satisfied. The transformations in all aspects came at the right time. If I were to fight with Hunchong now, I should be able to kill him effortlessly. Although they hadn't fought yet, Lin Feng had absolute confidence. Previously, he was like a swordsman who only knew ordinary saber moves. Now that he had learned a peerless saber technique, he was invincible. Part of it was absorbed by the chaotic energy of the universe, while the other part was much easier to bear. He didn't need to search for the heaven and earth fruit to strengthen his body. The baptism of the chaotic energy of the universe would saturate his body and bring him to the best state. Although it was only a single wave of universe chaos energy. However, it surpassed the sum of the 3 waves of chaos energy baptism during the previous samsara of destiny, and it was still continuing. Almost. Lin Feng heaved a long sigh. At most, he would not be able to hold on for another 10 years. After all, he was only holding on with his instinctive consciousness. Although his faith was still firm, his physical body had collapsed. However, the transformation in front of him not only made his physical body perfect, but also restored it to its original state. Even his soul was nourished, and everything became different. Let's see how long it will take for the 3rd threshold. Lin Feng had a feeling that he could win this battle. Everything was developing in a good direction. After going through rugged hardships, the clouds finally parted and the moon could see the moon. Extreme misfortune brought bliss. Focusing on his heart, Lin Feng no longer diverted his attention to do other things. Cultivating the first heaven of the 9 heavens of light and darkness was already the limit of what he could achieve at present. Wasting his soul, heart, and will to cultivate other things was not very useful. Instead, it would waste a part of his strength. When the 3rd threshold was about to end, when the samsara of destiny was about to end, he didn't want to make any mistakes and ruin the final effort. 50 years, 80 years, 100 years. Soon. He had a feeling that the end was close at hand. After persevering for a full 400 years and enduring endless pain, he finally reached the other side. The pressure of the 3rd threshold was erupting, but it was more like the final radiance of the setting sun, a deathbed struggle. Everything was within the range of endurance. Ha! Lin Feng roared, his eyebrows wide open. His strength erupted completely. The first heaven of light and darkness was exerted, and he was full of energy. The surging pain and pressure disappeared at the last moment, turning into nothingness. The pressure suddenly disappeared. It was as if the mountain that had been pressing on his body had suddenly collapsed and turned into sand and stone. That feeling made his whole body feel comfortable and relaxed. It's done. Lin Feng was very clear that he had crossed the most difficult 3rd threshold. The golden dragon mark had been lit up, and his will had been imprinted in the perfect crystal. Every cell in his body had been integrated with the mark of the wandering planet. Step by step, he had reached the end. Hua! There was a huge shock in his mind. A powerful force descended, causing Lin Feng to feel as if he was suffocating. The wandering planet shook violently, and endless space energy fused into it, as if turning into essence. The changes in space caused the wandering planet to shrink rapidly. A large area was space. A little bit was also space. To the wandering planet, it was just a change in space law. There was no difference. The difference was that Lin Feng's consciousness was deeply imprinted in the perfect crystal. His body, cells, skin, and bones all had the mark of the wandering planet completely integrated into it. Henceforth, they were one entity, inseparable. Lin Feng, who had just completed the baptism of the first heaven of light and darkness not long ago, once again enjoyed a new change. This time, it was different from before. There was no pain, only enjoyment. His body had truly undergone a perfect transformation, coexisting with the universe. The wandering planet was formed from the purest origin energy during the chaotic period of the universe. Now, Lin Feng and the wandering planet were coexisting perfectly. Naturally, his body would be greatly strengthened, turning into the purest origin energy of the universe. Universe chaotic body. Just from this alone, his gains were boundless. Not to mention that this was only the most basic change of the wandering planet. There were more and stronger powers. With the end of the cycle of destiny, the life crystal of the wandering planet was refined, and everything changed. The more you paid, the more you gained. Lin Feng welcomed a great harvest. Chapter 2248. Swoosh. 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 The space energy was endless. Everything was transforming. The black vortex absorbed the energy crazily and turned it into the essence it needed. The energy needed to reach the 6th stage from the 5th stage could be counted as days. But now the entire wandering planet fused into his body. Within the perfect crystal life crystal, Lin Feng's entire body was transforming, becoming a perfect body. The absorption of spatial energy was naturally endless. Just occupying the tip of the iceberg of the wandering planet was enough to make the black vortex transform. From the 5th stage to the 6th stage, it reached the limit in an instant. If Lin Feng's life rating was strong enough, it would not be a problem to reach the 7th or 8th stage. But now it was impossible. If the black vortex was too strong, his body would not be able to withstand it. But it was already terrifying. The black vortex was the limit of the 6th stage. Although the assimilation was not as good as the light and darkness bloodline, its energy was stronger. Space and time were the heavenly laws, which were better than the light and darkness laws. Therefore, its energy intensity was on par with the light and darkness bloodline. It was rare for Lin Feng to have two such powerful bloodline energies in the same person. Top-tier God. Top-tier God. Lin Feng's life rating transformed continuously and reached the level of a peak god. Although these were only the side effects of the assimilation of the wandering planet itself was too powerful. Therefore, even if it was just a small side effect, he still benefited a lot. He was only one step away from becoming a peak god. But he could not. Because the wandering planet was an 8-star life planet, the life force it could accommodate was at the level of a peak god. It was limited by the supreme law and could not go any further. Other special life forms were also stuck at this stage, including Lin Feng. It's not difficult. When I enter the universe, my life rating will soon break through the peak god limit and enter the heavenly god level. Lin Feng had absolute confidence that he did not have any bottlenecks now. The wandering planet would be integrated for his own use. He could go to any place on the wandering planet or wander in the universe with the help of the wandering planet. He could do whatever he wanted. When the integration is complete, I can go home. A smile appeared on Lin Feng's face. Surviving a calamity had brought him extraordinary changes. Now, he was no longer the ignorant person he used to be. When he returned to the Milky Way, even if he could not stop the collapse and explosion of the Milky Way's super black hole, he could at least take in all the life in the Milky Way with the characteristics of the wandering planet. If it's empty, it's empty. Before that, let's clear out the wandering planet. Where his will reached, Lin Feng's figure instantly disappeared. Now that the wandering planet was his, he could head to any region of the wandering planet, change the structure of the wandering planet, enjoy the power of the wandering planet, and use the supreme laws. Among the wandering planets, he was invincible. Origin enlightened continent. One reincarnation, one era. Most of the 9-star experts had entered the void turbulence, and some of the 8-star and 7-star experts had entered as well. This had caused a great change in the pyramid structure of the Origin Awakened Continent's expert. Some had risen and some had fallen. This was inevitable. The Void Dragon race and Thorn were undoubtedly the most miserable. Almost all of the 9-star experts in the former were dead, and the death of Dragon Emperor Jiankong was the most fatal blow. The current Void Dragon race was only left with a layer of skin. It was completely an empty shell. Calming Heart World. In contrast to the Void Dragon race, the Milky Way's human race did not suffer any damage in this reincarnation cycle. Especially the third sister's heroic retreat was a wise move. The fifth sister's Firefly rose to the heavens, her strength rising to the top 10 of the Origin Awakening list. But the real strongest was Patriarch Donghuang. After experiencing the reincarnation cycle, Donghuang's strength had risen by a lot. Although he was still not comparable to Yen Fajia, he was already sitting firmly in the second place of the Origin Awakening list. Don't worry, Patriarch. Nothing will happen. Yes, seventh brother is blessed by the heavens. He will definitely be able to turn misfortune into good fortune. I have 100% confidence in seventh brother. He even killed Dragon Emperor Jiankong, and Poison Rose did not dare to show her face. Haha. Shi Dingshan, Mystery, Firefly, Songya, and other experts gathered together. The reincarnation cycle had ended, and the void turbulence closed. Those who did not know only knew that a reincarnation cycle had ended, and did not even know the existence of the reincarnation cycle. But there were some who knew the inside story, such as Patriarch Dong Huang. Although Shi Dingshan, Firefly, and the others were confident in Lin Feng's strength, Dong Huang sighed in his heart. They firmly believed that it was because they did not understand the inside story. They did not know what had happened in this reincarnation cycle, and they did not know the rules of the reincarnation cycle, which was to succeed or die. How many of them could survive? Even if seventh brother Lin Feng was strong, could he be compared to the Crystal Queen and the Peak Yellow Deity? Dong Huang sighed. Compared to the experts of the God-fallen world, whether it was seventh brother Lin Feng or Yen Fa Jia, they were nothing special. Moreover, the reincarnation cycle had existed for countless eras, and no one had ever passed it. Wait. Dong Huang frowned in surprise. The reincarnation cycle has almost never been recorded. It is said that the experts who participated in the reincarnation cycle will definitely die if they fail. Why did we survive? Dong Huang knew very well that he, Bailey Jean, and Yen Fa Jia were still alive. Moreover, legends were one thing. Those who had participated in the reincarnation cycle would know that it was not a dead end. There was also a possibility of survival. If that's the case, it can be recorded in the classics and passed down. There have been tens of thousands of reincarnations. It's impossible that there are no records at all. What happened before? Dong Huang was puzzled. This was because he did not know that the experts who participated in the reincarnation cycle could not return to the wandering planet even if they failed and survived. Instead, they would be exiled from the wandering planet and enter the universe. But this time was an exception. This was because the supreme rules of the wandering planet had changed and were under Lin Feng's control. If Lin Feng wanted, the surviving experts like Dong Huang and Yen Fa Jia would be exiled, just like before. But if Lin Feng did not want to, they would naturally stay on the wandering planet. Anyway, there would be no more reincarnation cycles after this. Could it be what happened to the reincarnation cycle this time? Dong Huang was indeed very smart. He quickly found out what was wrong, but he was even more worried. This was because he knew that no matter what happened, it would only help Hun Chong, the unique super expert, the strongest special life form in the history of the God-fallen world. As for seventh brother Lin Feng, he had no chance at all. Seventh brother, you have to survive. Dong Huang pursed his lips tightly. This was his only wish now. Although he was looking forward to it, he knew that the hope was slim. Suddenly, seventh brother. Haha, I was just talking about you, seventh brother. You're finally back. A joyful voice sounded in his ears. Dong Huang, who was thinking hard with his head lowered, was slightly stunned. Did he hear it wrong? Or was he hallucinating because he had been immersed in it for too long? Dong Huang raised his head and looked at the familiar figure in front of him. His eyes widened in an instant, and he was so shocked that he could not speak. Long time no see, Patriarch. Lin Feng looked at Patriarch Dong Huang and smiled. Chapter 2249. The scene in front of him was completely out of Dong Huang's expectation. The sudden appearance of immortal Lin Feng was like a dream. Dong Huang was stunned for a few seconds before he came to his senses. Seventh brother, it's seventh brother. Seventh brother, you are still alive. Dong Huang, the patriarch, was overjoyed and laughed heartily. He finally let go of his worries. During the Samsara trip, he and Lin Feng had formed a deep friendship. They had gone through life and death together. Now, seeing Lin Feng return safely, He was very excited. Haha, Patriarch, you are so silly. Patriarch, you are so biased. I was not like this when I came back. Of course. Don't you know that Patriarch has already regarded seventh brother as the next successor of the human tribe of the Milky Way? Sure, Dingshan, Firefly, and Suan joked with each other. Just like Patriarch Donghuang, they were very happy to see seventh brother Lin Feng return safely. Even Sangya, who was the most serious, showed a rare smile. During the trip to the void, he had already regarded seventh brother Lin Feng as one of his own. Seeing everyone, Lin Feng was also very happy. Reuniting after a long time, the feeling came into his heart bit by bit, and he was indescribably gratified. Everyone was on the same side, and that kind of concern from the bottom of their hearts could be completely felt. Talking and laughing with everyone, Lin Feng also forgot himself, smiling constantly, and the gloomy clouds that had been lingering in his peaceful heart had long disappeared. In the secret chamber, Donghuang and Lin Feng talked face to face. There were too many people before, so it was not easy to talk. Seventh brother, how did you survive the samsara? Donghuang asked curiously. Is there any change in the samsara? There is a little change. Lin Feng looked at Patriarch Donghuang with a smile. Swish. Donghuang's eyes suddenly lit up and he sighed softly. Sure enough, this time the Hun suddenly emerged, and the whole samsara is completely different. Alas, it seems that he has completed the samsara, so... That's not right. If the samsara is completed, why is there no change at all? Talking to himself, Donghuang was puzzled. Lin Feng smiled. Looking at the Patriarch Donghuang committing suicide, Sui Er replied, Patriarch, you are right. The reincarnation of destiny has indeed been completed, but it is not mixed up. Donghuang was shocked and widened his eyes. Am I right? Did someone really pass the heavenly fate reincarnation? Wait, if it's not Bastard, then who is it? Could it be the Crystal Empress? Lin Feng shook his head. Not the Diamond Empress Tiku? Donghuang looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng still shook his head. Donghuang was stunned. None of the popular guesses were true. He was eliminated relatively early and didn't even make it into the top 10. Therefore, he didn't know what happened after that. After the cycle of destiny ended, he returned to Origin Awakened Continent's calming heart world and had yet to see Yen Fa. Seeing Lin Feng's confident smile, Donghuang's heart skipped a beat as if he was suffocating. He vaguely thought of something and looked up. Could it be that it was you who did it? Lin Feng smiled and finally nodded. He didn't want to hide it from the Patriarch, and there was nothing to hide. Bang! Donghuang staggered and almost fell. He looked at Lin Feng in a daze, as if he had misheard. His eyes widened. That was the heavenly fate reincarnation. Lin Feng, the seventh brother, had completed the heavenly fate reincarnation? You must be kidding. Both Bastard and I reached the sixth path of reincarnation. In the end, I was lucky and defeated him to pass the heavenly fate reincarnation, Lin Feng said casually. In fact, defeating Bastard was not a big deal. The most difficult part of the heavenly fate reincarnation was the final refining and assimilation with the wandering planet. But it didn't matter. Now, the news of defeating Bastard had made Donghuang completely dumbfounded and unable to react. Seventh brother, are you serious? Did you defeat Bastard? Donghuang asked in shock. Lin Feng nodded. If he told the Patriarch that he had subdued Bastard, the Patriarch would probably be shocked. But with his current strength, not to mention one Bastard, even 10 Bastards were no match for him. Then, through the heavenly fate reincarnation, does it mean that you can control the entire wandering planet? Donghuang asked. Lin Feng said, Yes, what do you want me to do for you, Patriarch? As long as he wanted to, the peaceful world could be changed. With a thought, all the lives on the wandering planet could be destroyed. This was control, complete control. Donghuang took a deep breath and didn't react for a long time. Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head. I don't know what to do now. What do you think, seventh brother? Lin Feng smiled. In fact, I don't intend to intervene much. Since the wandering planet has developed for so many eras, let it continue and let nature take its course. But now there are some weeds that are an eyesore. I'll cut them down. Weeds? Dong Wang understood what Lin Feng meant and sighed. Patriarch, you can develop at ease. The human clan of the Milky Way will only be strong and will not decline. Lin Feng made a promise to Dong Wang and smiled. With your current strength, no one can compete with you except Yin Fajie. There are many strong people in the human clan of the Milky Way. We can swallow the Void Dragon clan and Fatal Limit and develop vigorously. Fatal Limit? Dong Wang was stunned. Lin Feng nodded. Soon, Poisonous Rose will fall soon. I still have some things to do. I'll have a drink with you when I'm done. I believe that you should be very busy recently. I won't disturb you. You and I will have a good reunion then. I'll wait for your good news. Lin Feng and Dong Wang, the patriarch, said goodbye with a smile. At present, there were many things to be done, and the Chiyuan continent was in chaos. As the controller, he should sort it out. Moreover, he also wanted to untie several knots in his heart. Looking at the departing Lin Feng, Dong Wang let out a long sigh, unable to calm down. His seventh brother, Lin Feng, who had just joined the human clan of the Milky Way, was still vivid in his mind. Now, he had become an adult. Through the samsara of destiny, he had become an overlord and controlled the entire Chiyuan continent. No, it was the entire wandering planet. As long as he wanted, he could kill all the creatures in the entire Chiyuan continent. How terrifying! Fortunately, my seventh brother is still my seventh brother. Even if he has such great power, nothing has changed. Dong Wang secretly felt lucky. He had seen too many strong people who were corrupted by power and did whatever they wanted. But after chatting with his seventh brother, Lin Feng, he knew that he had not changed at all. He was still the same person as before. He clearly distinguished kindness and hatred, and pursued the path of the strong. Everything else was like an illusion to him. Fortunately, it was my seventh brother who passed the samsara of destiny. Dong Wang smiled, and there was a trace of ambition in his eyes. The human clan of the Milky Way had been dormant for a long time. Now that they had the support of his seventh brother, it was time to show their strength and completely rise. At that time, they would compete with Yen Fajie's Ziwei Star Tower. I won't lose to you, Yen Fajie. Dong Wang was ambitious and full of fighting spirit. Let's start by swallowing the Void Dragon clan. Chapter 2250. Origin Awakened Continent, Extreme Dragon Sky City. The three royal cities were still flourishing. No matter how the turbulent void changed, the royal cities that were supported by the three major forces changed very little. Even if one of them weakened, the other two would still be able to hold on. In the southeast, outside a secluded bamboo garden, there were a few ordinary guards guarding it. With one look, one would know that the people in the bamboo garden were either experts or wealthy. However, few people knew that the person living in the bamboo garden was not only an expert, but also a leader. A big shot that could shake the entire Origin Awakened continent with a stomp of her foot. The leader of Extreme Lethal, Poison Rose. Hidden in the city. Poison Rose was very smart. She did not hide outside the three royal cities nor in Extreme Lethal's base. She lived in the bamboo garden alone. Not only could she deal with Extreme Lethal's affairs immediately, but she could also hide her identity. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. When Poison Rose returned from the turbulent void, she knew that she was in big trouble. Because Stab was dead. Stab went to kill Lin Feng, but he died in the end. It went without saying what happened. Even Dragon Emperor Jiao Kong, who was her ally, died in Lin Feng's hands. All the 9-star experts of Extreme Lethal fell because of Lin Feng. Although Poison Rose hated Lin Feng to the bone, she did not dare to take revenge. The enemy was too strong. Endure. endure hardships to gain courage. I must not act in a moment of anger. As long as I am alive, extreme lethal will be able to operate. Lin Feng will not be able to guess that I am hiding under his nose. Poison Rose was absolutely confident. Moreover, there was a space in the bamboo garden. Not only was there an underground layer, there was also a great array outside to conceal her aura. The guards outside did not know her identity and could not enter. If she wanted to go out and contact the outside world, she had to go through the underground layer to reach extreme lethal. It was very safe here. I did not expect this brat's strength to improve so much. Even Stab is dead. Poison Rose gritted her teeth. Her beautiful face was a little distorted, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. She did not expect that someone as strong as Stab, who was almost on par with Yen Fajie, would also be killed. Back then, this Lin Feng was merely an ant that she could trample on. If not for the Azure Dragon King, she would have killed that brat long ago. He didn't expect that a moment of benevolence would bring him such a huge trouble. If I had known earlier, I would have killed him regardless of the consequences. Poison Rose clenched her teeth, regretting her past actions. The fiery red whip let out a hissing sound like a poisonous snake, and her exquisite and perfect body trembled incessantly. She was both regretful and angry, and wished for nothing more than to tear Lin Feng into 1,000 pieces. Suddenly, the surrounding space seemed to have solidified. Poison Rose was startled and turned to look outside the door in shock. She saw that familiar figure, and the aura that made her feel fear had unknowingly arrived. Lin Feng. You. Poison Rose pointed at Lin Feng and staggered backward. Even though she was terrified and gnashed her teeth at the sight of her enemy, her fear and dread were greater than her desire for revenge. How did I find this place? Lin Feng looked at Poison Rose indifferently and asked the question she wanted to ask the most. Actually, it's very simple. Because I can control everything. Lin Feng smiled and raised his hand. The golden dragon mark followed his heart. Poison Rose couldn't see it, but he knew it clearly. Through the life crystal, he could control every part of the wandering planet and easily go anywhere. As for the life forms on the wandering planet, it was even more impossible for them to escape his senses. All the array concealment was fake. As long as Poison Rose was still on the wandering planet, she wouldn't be able to escape from his grasp. Control everything? Poison Rose's beautiful eyes widened, and she was a little confused. Yes, control everything. Including your life. Lin Feng raised his hand and closed it slightly. An invisible force with the absolute might of the supreme laws compressed space to the extreme and directly killed Poison Rose. In this place, he was an invincible existence. He didn't even need to use his own strength. With a thought, he could destroy and change everything. It's settled. Lin Feng looked at the spot where Poison Rose had disappeared and sighed softly. He would repay kindness and take revenge for enmity. He wasn't someone who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, but he was also not someone who would repay evil with good. He would do what he should do and follow his heart. Poison Rose had tried to kill him time and time again. This kind of vicious woman couldn't be left alive. Poison Rose is dead. Extreme Fatal is leaderless. Plus, the 9-star powerhouses are all dead. Their vitality is greatly damaged. I believe that Thorn will get wind soon. The two are mortal enemies. He won't be merciful to Extreme Fatal and will definitely destroy it. Lin Feng could completely imagine that with Thorn's style and thunderous means, Extreme Fatal would definitely not be able to escape the destruction. There was no need for him to interfere. When the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Every place had its own rules. He had no interest in interfering with the normal development of the wandering planet. He would just let it continue in its normal mode. The Patriarch should be ready to take action. Lin Feng smiled. With the current strength of the Milky Way human race, annexing the Void Dragon race could be said to be a piece of cake. They could even do more. The only thing that could obstruct the Milky Way human race was the Z-Way star tower. But as long as he showed up, Yen Fagia wouldn't dare to go against the Milky Way human race. Back then, it was the Milky Way human race who cultivated him. Now, it was only right to return a big favor to the Milky Way human race. Lin Feng smiled, and then his figure disappeared. He wasn't in a hurry to find Yen Fagia. There was one more thing to do now, and that was to get rid of a big tumor in the Origin Awakening continent. A tumor that had existed since its birth. Their existence made him very uncomfortable. The Destiny race. They controlled the corpses of powerhouses and fought for them. They didn't even let the dead go. At the top of the pyramid of power in the Origin Awakening continent, they had a terrifying move like the Death Spirit Shock, which made other powerhouses hesitate to attack. The Destiny race could do whatever they wanted. Previously, he had gone deep into the Destiny realm and turned the Destiny race upside down. This time, he not only wanted to stir up chaos in the Destiny race, but he also wanted to eliminate them forever and make them disappear from the planet under his control. The Destiny race should be destroyed. Lin Feng's mind turned. The moment he disappeared from the bamboo garden, he came to the Destiny realm. He could directly reach the area that he could sense with his mind. It was as calm as ever, and space energy overflowed. The death of Wu Haodi, Wu Long, and other powerhouses didn't bring disaster to the Destiny race. After all, the other forces also suffered great losses. After each reincarnation, the various forces would disappear for a while to recover. Unlike the extreme fatal race, although many powerhouses of the Destiny race died, including their king Wu Haodi, he had killed them. However, the Destiny race had a deep foundation and an extreme cultivation place like the Destiny realm. They only needed tens of thousands of years to recover. Moreover, the kings of the Destiny race all had assistants. The bald Destiny race powerhouse, Meng Tai. He was very strong. Chapter 2251. After returning to the Destiny realm, memories flooded into his mind. Lin Feng was filled with emotions. He had spent a very unforgettable period of time here. As a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers, he had turned the Destiny realm upside down. Now that he thought about it, he felt like he was treading on thin ice. With his strength back then, it was indeed very risky. But now Lin Feng looked at the Destiny race tribe not far away. The Destiny race experts were also looking at him with wide eyes, as if they had not seen an outsider for a long time. Suddenly, they burst out in anger. A group of Destiny race experts swarmed out like locusts. Pa, pa. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. A huge force descended like 5 bolts of lightning, directly killing these so-called Destiny race experts. Right now, they were like ants. For the current Lin Feng, whether it was his own strength or his control of the supreme laws of the wandering planet, he could easily slaughter them and the entire Destiny realm. The sole attack of death was completely ineffective. After all, the attack was the supreme laws. The Destiny race was special, and it was also given by the supreme laws of the wandering planet. Naturally, it had no effect on the supreme laws. Swish! Lin Feng's figure flashed like lightning, and he soon arrived at the next Destiny race tribe. The same move, the same attack, directly destroyed one tribe after another. There was no mercy to speak of. From the beginning, Lin Feng did not intend to let the Destiny race continue to exist. Perhaps they were very talented. As a reproductive life form, they could be said to have reached the top of the pyramid. However, their poor character was enough to destroy everything. Character determines fate. Talent, aptitude, and even bloodline can be changed. It can even go against the heavens. Only character can't. Lin Feng now had complete control of the wandering planet. If he did not want the Destiny race to exist, they would not be able to survive. Deep in the Destiny realm, in the Destiny-defying palace, Meng Tai, the heavenly fate race's expert dressed in a monk's robe, stood tall. A group of heavenly fate race's experts stood respectfully around him. There were 9-star experts, 8-star experts, and even 7-star experts. None of them were stronger than Meng Tai. After all, Meng Tai was a mid-level God Realm expert. Back then, other than Yen Fagia, there were only 2 mid-level God Realm experts on the Origin Awakening list, Thorn and the Azure Dragon King. Therefore, Wu Hao came out of seclusion and entered the chaotic void space. Meng Tai started a bloody massacre on the land of Origin Awakened continent. No one could stop him. That was because his strength was truly terrifying. "What's your name?" Meng Tai's gaze swept across the Destiny Race's experts in the main hall. Finally, his gaze landed on a 7-star Destiny Race expert. The latter was overwhelmed by the favor and immediately cupped his hands. Reporting to the king, "This junior is Wu Qi." Wu Yuelong bowed her head slightly and said respectfully, "Wu Zhao is the rising star of the Wu Yuan tribe. Although he is not strong, he has shown his potential." Following the fall of Wu Hao Di, Wu Long, and Wu Jitian, among the Destiny Race, Wu Yuelong, who was ranked 30th on the Origin Awakening list, was the strongest. Of course, in the entire Destiny Race, the strongest was the King Fu Meng Tai. However, he did not have the Destiny Race bloodline and belonged to a different race. It was like how the Destiny Race was the royal race. Now that the Emperor had died, the ones with the greatest authority were the generals and prime ministers. This was the case for the King Fu Meng Tai. However, he was 100% loyal to the Destiny Race and took it as his duty to assist the new king. "You are the one." Meng Tai looked at Wu Qi and said indifferently, "Enter closed-door cultivation with me. When you come out, you will be the Destiny Race's commander and take over the position of the new king." Wu Qi's breathing became ragged as he goggled. He could not believe that a meat pie would fall from the sky and land on his head. The other Destiny Race experts felt envious. They were all stronger than Wu Qi, however. Meng Tai did not even look at them. This included Wu Yuelong. They felt somewhat disappointed and jealous, but they did not dare to say anything. After all, they were not a match for Meng Tai even if they worked together. "Why are you still not thanking the King Fu?" Wu Yuelong reminded the stupefied Wu Qi she was very sensible. The latter understood and quickly knelt in a fluster. "Thank you, King Fu." "All right." Meng Tai placed his hands behind his back and closed his eyes slightly. He enjoyed this feeling of being high and mighty. Although Wu Qi would be stronger than Xiao Chen in the future, Xiao Chen was the Destiny Race's king right now. He controlled everything. Xiao Chen could choose whoever he wanted and kill whoever he wanted. How many people in the entire Origin Awakened continent could be a match for him? Back then, Xiao Chen massacred the entire Origin Awakened continent. Those so-called Origin Awakened ranking experts were all like cowards. Normally, they spoke righteously. However, when it came to life and death, they were all the same. "Get up." Meng Tai raised his hand slightly. However, he only spoke halfway when his face turned red. Then, he covered his neck with both hands. Wu Qi's eyes filled with horror and horror. He did not know what happened, but the surroundings instantly turned dark. His soul seemed to lose its life. Wu Qi goggled in horror. He wanted to make a sound but could not utter a single word. Wu Qi fell to the ground in an instant. The entire hall fell silent. All the Destiny Race experts were flabbergasted, feeling incredibly shocked. What happened? Thud. A black figure slowly walked in from outside the palace. His smile was like that of the Grim Reaper. He glanced at the group of Destiny Race experts and said indifferently, "All the Destiny Race experts have fallen. Now, only 17 of you are left in the Destiny realm." Thud. Thud. The Destiny Race experts were all stunned. They did not understand what was going on. However, they all understood in the next moment. With a wave of his hand, the Death God Youth's soul and physical body collapsed at the same time. Their vitality surged and scattered. One by one, they fell to the ground and died. Their souls scattered. Even when they died, they did not know what had happened. Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. Lin Feng's gaze indifferently swept over them. Spatial energy surged and directly swallowed the corpses of the Destiny Race expert. The entire Destiny realm was empty. There was no longer any life. None of the Destiny Race experts were left alive. They were all dead. The corpses of the experts they controlled returned to dust with their death. They could finally rest in peace. It's over. Lin Feng let out a sigh of relief. There was nothing else he wanted to do in the Origin Awakened continent. Everything would develop naturally. After leaving the Destiny realm, Lin Feng went to the Ziwei Star Tower and met Yen Fagia. They chatted for a while. Then, he met up with Bailey Jean and they drank to their heart's content. After that, he visited a few old friends and reminisced about the past. He wandered alone on the endless wandering planet. The years were long and his cultivation was endless. Hundreds of years passed in the blink of an eye. As the human clan of the Milky Way blossomed all over the Origin Awakened continent and surpassed the Ziwei Star Tower to seize the first position, Lin Feng's fusion with the wandering planet was finally completed. It was perfect, the limit of a peak divine spirit. His combat power was difficult to estimate. He completely surpassed ordinary heavenly god. Time to go home. Lin Feng smiled and left the wandering planet. Chapter 2252. Returning to the Milky Way. For Lin Feng, who had perfectly fused with the wandering planet and obtained a great opportunity, returning was very easy. This was different from the experts on the wandering planet. They needed to remove the restraints on their bodies to leave the wandering planet, and these restraints were now in Lin Feng's hands. With the scripture left by his ancestor, the Wan Qian Dao, and 2 bloodlines, Lin Feng's current combat strength was unparalleled. His life rating was only at the peak of the god level, but his combat strength was already unpredictable. My ancestors Wan Qian Dao said that if one cultivated the first heaven of light and darkness, their combat strength would be comparable to a peak god. However, my bloodline is even stronger. My soul and physical body are both extraordinary. Right now, my battle prowess is comparable to a mid-heavenly god, or even stronger. After carefully comparing the strength of a heavenly god expert, Lin Feng had a rough understanding of his own strength. All the gods, including low, mid, high, and peak gods, had reached the 100,000 origin realm. Some of them had even reached the 100,000 origin realm in the laws of space and the laws of time, but they were basically all peak god. After all, reaching 100,000 origins in the laws of Empyrean was a necessary requirement to break through the peak god level and become a god master. Compared to ordinary god experts who had reached 100,000 origins in the laws of Empyrean, they were stronger in the analysis of laws and the construction of secret techniques. He was stronger in the foundation. Now that his body had fused with the wandering planet, it had become the universe chaos body. There was no need for further strengthening. He could automatically absorb energy from the universe to the limit. There was no need to mention his soul. It was nurtured by the Wan Qian mustard stone. Whether it was quality or quantity, it was far superior to experts of the same level. His only flaw was his bloodline. His bloodline was too strong, so it was too difficult to break through. However, the stronger the bloodline, the higher the upper limit, and the stronger the strength of those of the same level. It was already good for others to have one super strong bloodline, but he had two. The trouble of happiness. Lin Feng smiled. Returning to the Milky Way did not cause any discomfort. Although the energy here was incomparable to that of the wandering planet, this was his home, the place where he grew up. Nothing could replace it. And the solar system in the Milky Way, Earth, was his home, his root. If a person did not have roots, it would be difficult for his heart to find a home. The Milky Way is now on the verge of destruction. Its energy has been greatly reduced, and the laws of the galaxy are no longer limited. Lin Feng could feel the chaotic energy around him. The supreme law of the galaxy had been lost, and the super black hole was devouring the energy, wreaking havoc in the galaxy. Here, the increase of one's strength was no longer restricted because there were no rules to suppress it. He could easily break through to the heavenly god level and become a heavenly god, as long as he had enough power. From deity to Empyrean god, the bloodline is one aspect, while the body and soul are the other. This is a benchmark and pivot for cosmos deities. Ordinary deities and deities are merely ordinary citizens of the cosmos. The moment they step into the celestial deity realm, it means that they have comprehended a complete heavenly Tao and have the possibility of transcending the cosmos. Deities were just spirits. However, the heavenly deity had already been bestowed with the word heaven, meaning the heavenly Tao. My physical body and soul are strong enough. They are even more outstanding than most heavenly god experts. The only thing I lack now is the comprehension of a complete heavenly way. Lin Feng was very clear. Including his current bloodline, he had already reached the peak of God Spirit. After fusing with a wandering planet, his bloodline was sufficient, and the breakthrough was close at hand. The so-called heavenly Tao was very broad. Lower-level laws, middle-level laws, and upper-level laws could all be comprehended to a complete heavenly Tao. Of course, it was much easier to comprehend a heavenly Tao through heavenly laws. Weapons and power control all had a heavenly Tao. Even the heart force and the soul lineage could be comprehended as long as one persevered and had sufficient talent and comprehension ability. It was just that some days the heavenly Tao was narrower, while some days the heavenly Tao was wider and had more forks. But the most fundamental thing was that some heavenly Taos were not only narrow but also short. Even if one cultivated to the limit, they would only reach the peak of God Master. It was difficult to transcend the limit of the universe, let alone reach the limit of the universe. Choice was very important, because once one chose a heavenly Tao, it would be difficult to cultivate a second heavenly Tao at the same time. Not only would it be a waste of time, but they could also collide, increasing the difficulty of comprehending. Which path should I choose? Lin Feng wasn't sure either. The most suitable path for him now was naturally the 9 heavens of light and darkness that followed his bloodline. This was a path that had been proven by his ancestors. Not only could he transcend the limit of the universe, but he could also cultivate to the limit of the universe. When he had comprehended the first heaven of light and darkness, it had caused a phenomenon in the sky. With the 9 heavens of light and darkness as the foundation, not only would the path of comprehending a heavenly Tao be easier, but it would also be very smooth. Because he himself possessed such a bloodline. But after fusing with a wandering planet, he had a second heavenly Tao path, which was the black vortex. Like the light and darkness bloodline, it had also reached the 6th stage and was the limit. The black vortex bloodline was not only a heavenly law, but also a fusion of 2 heavenly laws. In terms of upper limit, it was stronger than the fusion of light and darkness. Although light and darkness were conflicting laws, the great Tao of light and the great Tao of darkness were only upper-level laws. Even if they were conflicting and merged with the original foundation there, it could indeed surpass heavenly laws, but there would be a limit. However, the fusion of space and time laws had no limit at all. In itself, this was the power of the universe's chaos. There is darkness ahead of this path. It is very difficult and rugged, but if you can go through it smoothly, the path will become wider and wider. It is longer than the heavenly Tao path of the light and darkness Tao path, and the upper limit is higher. Lin Feng was clear in his heart. In the Wanqian Tao, his ancestor had once reminded him that after surpassing the limit and wandering the universe, he should stop cultivating the 9 heavens of light and darkness and switch to cultivating other heavenly Tao. In this way, he could break through the limits of the heavenly Tao. Not only could he prove his Tao, but he could also break through Tao. The wandering planet itself is the embodiment of space laws and contains endless space, heavenly Tao. It is the embodiment of the universe's chaos. After fusing with it, not only will my cultivation of space heavenly Tao be twice the result with half the effort, but it will also be very smooth and effortless. With the support of the endless space energy of the wandering planet, the black vortex can continue to convert energy, which is of great benefit to both combat and cultivation. The only variable is the time loss. But since I have the black vortex bloodline and a strong soul, my talent in time is naturally not too bad. However, to cultivate this heavenly Tao, I am afraid that the time spent is 10 times or even 100 times more than the heavenly Tao of light and darkness. Lin Feng sighed. The two heavenly Tao each had its advantages and disadvantages. At present, it was still difficult to choose, and he did not know where to go. This is also a happy trouble. Lin Feng sighed, but he was not worried, because no matter what choice he made, the result would not be too bad. Now that he had just returned to the Milky Way, there were still many things to do, and he was not in a hurry. First, he would return to the Donghuang Empire, his own Milky Way territory, Earth. As the Milky Way overlord, I should also do something. Lin Feng nodded. Chapter 2253. Xing Feng Astral Sector, Yun Xian Universe Country. A universe empire had dozens of galaxy clusters if it was small, and thousands of galaxy clusters if it was large. It was boundless. In the universe, the planets and stars only occupied a small part of it. Most of it was the endless universe space. And in this endless universe space, black holes of all sizes were either born or destroyed. Every black hole was a natural black domain that contained endless space. Even the smallest black hole's devouring power could only be resisted by a chaos hole immortal. As for the super black holes of the universe, only a black domain master could withstand them. There were two types of black holes. One was naturally formed, and the other was formed later. The naturally formed ones were nurtured by the universe. They often nurtured a shocking amount of chaos energy, heaven and earth spirit items, and even natural universe secret realms. The longer they were born, the more valuable they were. The postnatal black holes were the inner worlds of the strong. The stronger the strong, the bigger the black hole and the wider the inner world. The two types of black holes were hard to distinguish from the outside. Only some special treasures could distinguish them. There were 3 ways to distinguish them. The first was to wait for a long time to see if the black hole's energy would increase or grow. The black holes born naturally in the universe had stronger devouring powers. The black holes themselves would grow, just like life, from small to large, from birth to growth to the peak, and then to weakening. As for the postnatal black holes, because the strong had already fallen, their inner worlds could also be maintained for a long time with the remaining energy of the strong. However, they would not grow and would only slowly weaken. The second method was much simpler. It was to enter the black hole to see what was going on. However, this method was quite dangerous. The devouring powers of the postnatal black holes of the universe were usually not strong. Ordinary God-level strong people could easily resist them. Even the super black holes of the universe were not friendly to the postnatal universe life forms, heaven and earth spirit items, and universe secret realms. The truly dangerous ones were the postnatal black holes, the inner worlds of the fallen strong people. It was very likely that the remnant consciousness would brutally attack and destroy everything. Its devouring power was much stronger than the postnatal black holes of the universe. The strongest could even kill a God-level strong person. As for the third method, it was to distinguish them by treasures. However, these treasures were very rare and could only be found by chance. Or a knight who had transcended the great limit would be able to tell at a glance. Hua! A pair of eyes that were as sharp as the stars opened, as if 10,000 bolts of lightning were shooting out. It was a demon race expert clad in black armor. He had a horn on his head, greenish-brown skin, and 3 golden lines on his cheeks. In the middle of his horn, there was a dark bulge that contained great power. How many eras has it been? He's finally weakened. The expert of the three-horned demon race bared his sharp fangs and made a grinding sound. In front of him, there was an incomparably huge super-black hole that was surging in all directions. Its aura and energy were chaotic, and the surrounding space was constantly changing. The universe's spiritual energy was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. It was like the sign of a volcanic eruption, and it was extremely violent. Galaxy Super Black Hole. The Milky Way Super Black Hole, which was on the verge of destruction and had reached the end of its lifespan, could not devour the energy of the outside world. It was on the verge of collapse, and its huge body was like an old man in his twilight years. The weakening period is as long as 1 billion years. This must be a naturally formed black hole, and an extremely rare super black hole at that. This true dragon guy sure knows how to find a place. The expert of the three-horned demon race snorted and looked behind him with disdain. Several spaceships were docked in the distance, waiting for the natural black hole to collapse. The Hull Clan and the West Eel Mercenary Group. How dare these two groups of small fries compete with me? Humph. After 1 billion years, even if the Xion cosmic nation was vast and endless, with more than 95% of the unexplored dark areas, there were still many adventurous experts who happened to find this place. However, there were very few of them. After all, the nearest wormhole would take tens of thousands of years for even the best spaceship in the Xion cosmic nation to fly through the dark matter space. An ordinary spaceship would take an astronomical number to go back and forth. Moreover, the wormhole itself was very hidden. To pass through it, one would have to search for it in the vast darkness, and the chances were extremely slim. It was too difficult to find a black hole in the universe astral world. The expert of the three-horned demon race was extremely arrogant. He did not care about the spaceships behind him at all. He had the right to be arrogant. With the strength of a peak almighty, he was considered a top expert in the Xion cosmic nation. However, there was always someone better than him. At this moment, at an even further place, a thin, eagle-browed male whose figure had turned illusory was hiding in the darkness. He was like a treasure sword hidden in a scabbard. He was so sharp that even the expert of the three-horned demon race could not discover him. Xion cosmic nation, devil godly sure. The eagle-browed male looked ahead where the expert of the three-horned demon race was. According to the data, 1 billion years ago, he came out from the cloud stream hidden realm with the human expert True Dragon. They turned against each other and eventually, the human expert True Dragon fled. There has been no news of him since. It is suspected that he has fallen. It seems that they were fighting over treasures. The eagle-browed male was not an expert from the Xion cosmic nation. He did not have the Xion cosmic nation citizen emblem on his chest. But regardless of experience or strength, he was extraordinary. Devil Godly sure was waiting, and so was he. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Innately formed black holes were different from those formed after. Black holes formed in the cosmos chaos were different from those formed after. After the black holes formed in the cosmos chaos completely collapsed, other than leaving behind valuable treasures, there would definitely be a cosmos top-grade treasure, a black hole chaotic origin heart. After returning to the Milky Way, Lin Feng went directly to the Donghuang Empire. Revisiting the old place, there were ripples in his heart. Nothing had changed much here. The 7 empires were still dominating the Milky Way. They had not been shaken for thousands of years, and their foundation was solid. However, the Milky Way was now an arrow at the end of its flight. The spirit chi was greatly weakened and disappeared. The experts could no longer cultivate, and the bloodline of life was getting thinner and thinner. Everyone was in danger. They wanted to escape from this cage, but they were powerless. All the power and influence is in vain in the end. Lin Feng sighed. Even the emperors of the 7 empires would eventually be destroyed along with the Milky Way. They were no different from ordinary people. In the vast universe, only strength was the most fundamental. Only with strength could one have the ability to decide one's own fate. I'm going to see an old friend and buy a spaceship with the best performance and speed. Lin Feng's speed easily reached the speed of light. No expert in the Milky Way could see his shadow. The difference in strength was like heaven and earth.